In the flickering glow of jack-o'-lanterns, the village of Woodler Common hides a deadly secret. A child's boast of witnessing a murder sparks a chilling chain of events at Rowena Drake's spooky soiree, when young Joyce is found drowned in an apple-bobbing tub. Hercule Poirot arrives to unravel a web of lies, betrayal, and buried crimes. Who saw what in the shadowed quarry garden? Why are the village's children targets? And what darkness lurks behind the festive masks? Pour into a mystery where every pumpkin hides a clue, and every clue could be a killer's trap. Music crescendos with a suspenseful sting. Chapter 1. The Pumpkin-Lit Invitation. The village of Woodler Common lay, nestled in a crook of the English countryside, its thatched cottages and winding lanes bathed in the golden haze of late October. The air carried the crisp bite of autumn, laced with the scent of damp leaves and wood smoke. Pumpkins, carved into leering faces, glowed on doorsteps, their flickering candles casting eerie shadows that danced across cobblestone paths. Hallowe'en was approaching, and the village thrummed with anticipation for the grand soiree hosted by Rowena Drake, a widow of considerable charm and wealth, whose sprawling estate, apple trees, stood as the heart of the community's festivities. Rowena, a woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked auburn hair and a penchant for velvet shawls, had spent weeks planning what she dubbed the spooky soiree. Her invitations, written in elegant calligraphy on parchment adorned with ink-drawn bats, had been hand-delivered to every household in Woodler Common. The event promised apple-bobbing ghost stories and a costume contest, with whispers of a surprise that Rowena teased would chill the bones. The village children, in particular, buzzed with excitement, their chatter filling the schoolyard as they debated whether to dress as witches, ghouls, or the ever-popular Dracula. Among the flurry of preparations, Ariadne Oliver arrived in Wood Common, her suitcase rattling against the train platform as she disembarked. A celebrated mystery novelist, Ariadne was known for her tousled grey curls, her penchant for apples, and her detective hero, Sven Hjersen, whose exploits had captivated readers across England. Rowena had invited Ariadne to lend a touch of literary glamour to the soiree, hoping her presence would elevate the event from a village gathering to a spectacle worthy of gossip beyond the county lines. Ariadne, ever susceptible to flattery and intrigued by the promise of a Halloween mystery game, had agreed, though she now wondered if she'd underestimated the chaos of organizing a party for a village full of restless children and nosy adults. As Ariadne stepped into apple trees, she was greeted by a whirlwind of activity. The grand hall, with its oak-paneled walls and crystal chandelier, was being transformed into a Halloween wonderland. Children scampered about, stringing paper skeletons across the rafters, while adults hauled in barrels for apple bobbing and arranged tables laden with spiced cider and toffee apples. Pumpkins of every size lined the room, their carved grins illuminated by candles that cast a warm, flickering glow. The scent of cinnamon and cloves mingled with the faint mustiness of old wood, creating an atmosphere that was both festive and faintly unsettling. Rowena swept forward, her emerald green dress shimmering under the chandelier's light. "Ariadne, darling," she exclaimed, clasping the novelist's hands. "You've arrived just in time to save me from this madness. The children are positively feral, and I've half a mind to cancel the whole affair." Ariadne chuckled, peeling off her scarf. "Nonsense, Rowena. A little chaos is the soul of a good party. Besides, I'm here to add a touch of mystery, not to tame the beast." Rowena's eyes sparkled. "Oh, you're a godsend. I've planned a murder mystery game. For the children, nothing gruesome. Of course, just a bit of fun. You'll help me script it, won't you? Something with clues hidden in pumpkins. Perhaps. Pumpkins, clues, and a touch of menace," Ariadne mused, her mind already spinning with ideas. "But let's keep it light. We don't want to scare. Put the little ones into nightmares." As they spoke, a group of children gathered nearby, their voices rising in a cacophony of excitement. Among them was Joyce Reynolds, a 13-year-old with a mop of chestnut curls and a reputation for tall tales. Joyce was known for her dramatic flair, often regaling her classmates with stories of ghosts in the churchyard or secret tunnels beneath the village green. Today she was dressed in a makeshift witch's costume, her black shawl trailing behind her like a cape. "Mrs. Oliver," Joyce called, pushing through the crowd. "You're the famous writer, aren't you? I've read all your books. Sven Hirsen's brilliant, though he'd solve cases faster if he didn't fuss about his hair so much." Ariadne raised an eyebrow, amused. "Sven's hair is a vital part of his process, my dear. But I'm flattered you think so highly of him. Are you here to help with the party?" Joyce puffed out her chest. "I'm going to win the costume contest, and I've got a story that'll beat any mystery you write." She lowered her voice, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "I saw a murder once, a real one. But nobody believes me because they think I'm just making it up." The chatter around them stilled, and Ariadne felt a prickle of unease. The other children exchanged glances, some giggling, others rolling their eyes. A boy named Desmond, dressed as a skeleton, snorted, "Joyce, you're always making things up. Last week you said you saw a mermaid in the river. It's true." Joyce snapped, her cheeks flushing. "I was in the quarry garden ages ago, and I saw someone getting hurt. I didn't know it was a murder then, but now I'm sure of it." Rowena, overhearing, stepped in with a forced laugh. "Joyce, darling, let's not scare the younger ones with your stories. Why don't you help with the pumpkin carving? We need a few more jack-o'-lanterns for the porch." Joyce scowled but stomped off toward the carving station, her shawl flapping indignantly. Ariadne watched her go, her writer's instincts tingling. The girl's claim was likely a bid for attention, but something in her earnest tone lingered, like a discordant note in an otherwise cheerful melody. "She's a handful, that one," Rowena murmured, guiding Ariadne toward a table piled with apples always spinning tales. Last month she swore she found a haunted locket in the churchyard. Turned out to be a cheap trinket from the market. Ariadne nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. "Children do love their stories," she said absently, "but sometimes they see more than we give them credit for." The afternoon wore on, and Ariadne threw herself into the preparations, scripting a light-hearted mystery game where the children would hunt for clues hidden in hollowed-out pumpkins. She crafted a tale of a missing heirloom, a ghostly figure, and a secret message encoded in the flicker of candlelight. The children were delighted, their laughter echoing through apple trees as they tested the clues, their costumes a riot of color against the hall's somber wood dot. Yet, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the estate, Ariadne couldn't shake the unease Joyce's words had stirred. She found herself watching the girl, who now sat cross-legged by a pumpkin, her knife carving jagged teeth into its flesh. Joyce's expression was defiant, but her eyes darted nervously, as if expecting someone to challenge her again. At dusk, the village school teacher, Elizabeth Whittaker, arrived, her severe black dress and pinched expression making her look more like a mourner than a partigore. She greeted Ariadne with a curt nod. "Mrs. Oliver, I trust you're keeping the children's imaginations in check. Joyce has been particularly disruptive today with her nonsense about murders." Ariadne bit into an apple, considering her response. "Children's imaginations can be wild, Miss Whittaker, but they often pick up on things adults miss. Perhaps Joyce saw something worth listening to." Elizabeth's lips thinned. "She's a liar, Mrs. Oliver. Always has been. I'd advise you not to indulge her." Before Ariadne could reply, a commotion erupted near the fireplace. Mrs. Goodbody, the local cleaner and self-proclaimed village witch, had arrived. Her costume a masterpiece of tattered robes and a pointed hat adorned with cobwebs. She carried a basket of apples, which she distributed with a cackle, her rheumy eyes glinting with mischief. "Eat an apple, dearies, and make a wish," she crooned, pressing one into Ariadne's hand. "But mind you don't wish for secrets. They've a way of biting back." Ariadne smiled, but the apple felt heavy in her palm, its skin glossy, pen cold. She glanced at Joyce, who was now whispering to a younger girl, Miranda Butler, whose pale face and wide eyes suggested she was both fascinated and frightened by Joyce's tales. Miranda's mother, Judith, hovered nearby, her serene beauty a stark contrast to the chaos around her. Ariadne noted the protective way Judith's hand rested on Miranda's shoulder, as if shielding her from some unseen threat. As the evening drew near, the hall was nearly ready. The pumpkins glowed brighter, their grins seeming to widen in the dimming light. The children practiced their ghost stories, their voices rising and falling like a chorus of spirits. Rowena flitted about, adjusting decorations and issuing last-minute instructions. Her laughter bright but tinged with strain. Ariadne settled into a corner with a cup of cider, her notebook open as she jotted down ideas for the mystery game. But her thoughts kept drifting to Joyce's claim. Bear a murder scene, but not understood until later, it was the kind of plot twist she might write herself. Yet here it felt too real, too raw. She resolved to speak to Joyce privately, to tease out the truth behind her story. But the girl had vanished. into the throng of children, her witch's shawl a fleeting shadow among the crowd. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows and sending leaves skittering across the lawn. The pumpkins on the porch flickered, their flames guttering as if struggling against an unseen force. Ariadne shivered, pulling her cardigan tighter. It was just the autumn chill, she told herself, but the air felt charged, as if the village bee itself were holding its breath. Rowena appeared at her side, her face flushed with excitement. "Ariadne, it's nearly time. The children are ready for your mystery game, and I've got a surprise for the adults. Midnight ghost walk through the quarry garden. It's perfectly spooky, don't you think?" Ariadne forced a smile, her unease growing. "Spooky, indeed. Let's hope it's all in good fun, Rowena." As the first guests began to arrive, their costumes transforming them into ghouls and goblins, Ariadne scanned the room for Joyce. The girl's words echoed in her mind. "I saw a murder once." The hall was alive with laughter and music, but beneath the festive clamor, Ariadne sensed a current of something darker, something waiting to surface. She didn't believe in ghosts, but she knew the power of secret sand in Woodler Common. Secrets seemed to lurk in every shadow, waiting to be carved open like the pumpkins that lit the night. The chapter closed with the party poised to begin, the stage set for a night of revelry and revelation. Joyce's claim, dismissed by most, hung in the air like a ghostly whisper, promising that the spooky soiree would be far more than a simple village celebration. Chapter 2. The Apple-Bobbing Tragedy. The grand hall of Rowena Drake's Woodler Common estate shimmered with a spectral glow. Its high ceilings draped in cobwebs, spun from gossamer threads, and illuminated by the flickering light of a dozen carved pumpkins. Their jagged grins cast dancing shadows across the polished oak floor, where children in costumes, witches, ghosts, and ghoulish creatures shrieked with delight. The air was thick with the scent of spiced cider, roasted chestnuts, and the faint, earthy musk of autumn leaves tracked in from the chilly October night. Rowena, resplendent in a velvet gown the color of midnight, glided through the crowd, her smile as polished as the silver candelabras that adorned the long banquet table. The Hallowe'en Party, her annual triumph, was in full swing, a celebration that drew every soul. In the village to her sprawling manor, at the heart of the festivities, stood the apple-bobbing tub, a wide copper basin filled with water that glinted like a dark mirror. Apples bobbed lazily on its surface, their glossy skins catching the candlelight as children took turns plunging their faces into the cold, seeking the slippery prize. Laughter and splashing mingled with the strains of a gramophone playing a jaunty tune, its needle scratching out a melody that felt oddly out of place beneath the hall's vaulted, almost funereal arches. Ariadne Oliver, the famed mystery novelist, stood near the tub, her auburn hair pinned loosely beneath a witch's hat that tilted at a rakish angle. She sipped a glass of mulled wine, her sharp eyes scanning the room, cataloguing every detail with the precision of a woman who spun secrets for a living. Too much noise. Ariadne muttered to herself, adjusting her hat as a group of children darted past, their capes fluttering like bat wings. She had arrived in Woodler Common at Rowena's invitation, ostensibly to lend her flair for the dramatic to the party's planning. But her mind was elsewhere. Earlier that day, 13-year-old Joyce Reynolds had cornered her in the kitchen, her freckled face alight with a strange intensity. "I saw a murder once," Joyce had declared, her voice loud enough to draw glances from the maids slicing pumpkins. "I didn't know it was a murder then, but I do now." Ariadne had dismissed it as a child's fanciful tale, the kind spun to impress or provoke. Yet the memory of Joyce's earnest eyes lingered, a splinter in Ariadne's thoughts. Now, as the party whirled around her, Ariadne's gaze settled on Joyce, who stood apart from the other children, her arms crossed and her lips pursed in a scowl. She wore a makeshift ghost costume, a white sheet with ragged eye holes, but her expression was anything but playful. Joyce had been mocked mercilessly after her bold claim, first by her peers and then by the adults, who chuckled indulgently at her imagination. Ariadne felt a pang of guilt for her own dismissive laugh. Perhaps she should have pressed the girl for details. Joyce caught her eye and turned away, stomping toward the apple-bobbing tub with a defiance that seemed to dare the world to ignore her. The tub was surrounded by a gaggle of children, their voices rising in a competitive chorus as they urged one another on. Leopold, Joyce's younger brother, a wiry boy of 10 with a mop of unruly brown hair, was among them, his pirate costume askew as he leaned over the basin, teeth snapping at an apple. "Come on, Joyce, you try," he called, his voice muffled by water. Joyce hesitated, her eyes flicking to the crowd, as if weighing whether to join the game or retreat into her sulk. Then, with a toss of her sheet-draped head, she marched forward. Elbowing her way to the front, Ariadne watched, her writer's instinct prickling. There was something about Joyce's determination, the way her small hands gripped the edge of the tub, that felt less like childish bravado and more like a need. Prove something. The other children cheered, their voices a cacophony of encouragement and taunts. "Go on, Joyce. Don't be scared," one shouted. Joyce knelt, her sheet slipping slightly to reveal a flush of anger on her cheeks. She plunged her face into the water, her movements jerky, almost desperate. The apples bobbed away from her, elusive as the truth she claimed to hold. The gramophone skipped a jarring note that made Ariadne flinch. She set her wineglass on a nearby table, her unease growing. The hall felt too warm now, the air heavy with the weight of too many bodies, too many secrets. She glanced at Rowena, who was laughing with a group of villagers near the fireplace. Her charm, effortless yet somehow calculated. Ariadne's mind churned, piecing together fragments. Joyce's claim, the dismissive laughter, the way Rowena's eyes had flickered when Ariadne mentioned it earlier. Was there something here, some thread she was missing? A scream tore through the hall, sharp and raw, silencing the laughter and freezing the children in place. It came from the apple-bobbing tub. Ariadne's heart lurched as she pushed through the crowd, her witch's hat tumbling to the floor. The children parted, their faces pale, their costumes suddenly grotesque in the candlelight. At the tub, a woman, Mrs. Whittaker, the village schoolteacher, her face ashen beneath her pointed hat, stood, trembling, her hands clutching the air, as if to ward off what she saw. Joyce was slumped over the tub, her face submerged in the water, her hands limp at her sides. The sheet of her ghost costume clung to her shoulders, sodden and heavy. The apples floated around her, their red and green skins bobbing gently, as if nothing had happened. Ariadne's breath caught in her throat. She knelt beside the tub, her hands shaking as she reached for Joyce, but Mrs. Whittaker grabbed her arm. "Don't," she whispered, her voice cracking. She's gone." The room erupted into chaos. Children screamed, some running to their parents, others frozen in horror. Rowena appeared, her composure fracturing as she pushed through the crowd. "What's happened?" she demanded, her voice sharp. When she saw Joyce, her hand flew to her mouth, and for a moment Ariadne thought she saw something flicker in Rowena's eye sphere, perhaps, or something darker. "Call a doctor," someone shouted, but Ariadne knew it was too late. Joyce's body was still, her face pale beneath the water, her eyes open in a sightless stare. The apples bobbed around her like mocking witnesses, their glossy surfaces catching the light. Ariadne's mind raced, her novelist's instinct battling her shock. This was no accident. The angle of Joyce's body, the way her hands hung limply, suggested she had been held down. Someone had done this, here, in the midst of a crowded party. Leopold, his pirate hat askew, pushed through the crowd, his face crumpling as he saw his sister, Joyce, he wailed, lunging toward the tub. Ariadne caught him, pulling him back, her arms wrapping round his trembling frame. "No, Leopold, stay back," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. His sobs tore at her, each one a reminder of her failure to take Joyce seriously. Rowena took charge, her voice cutting through the panic. "Everyone, please, step back, give us space." She gestured to a young man in a skeleton costume, the village postman who ran to fetch the doctor. The adults herded the children away from the tub, their whispers a low hum of shock and speculation. Ariadne overheard fragments. She was always telling tales. Maybe she slipped. "No, it's too strange." Ariadne's eyes narrowed. She knelt again, studying the scene. The tub was deep, but not so deep that a healthy girl like Joyce could have drowned accidentally in a moment of inattention. The water was disturbed, ripples still spreading from where Joyce's body lay. Ariadne's gaze flicked to the floor, where a trail of water droplets led away from the tub toward the shadowed corner of the hall. She stood, her mind racing. Someone had been here, someone who had acted quickly and quietly in the chaos of the party. Mrs. Goodbody, the village cleaner dressed as a witch, appeared at Ariadne's side, her eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. "Pussy in the well," she murmured, her voice low and sing-song, as if reciting a nursery rhyme. "Who put her in? Who pulled her out?" Ariadne shivered, the words echoing the eerie folklore she'd heard earlier that day. Mrs. Goodbody's gaze lingered on the tub, then flicked to the crowd, as if searching for someone. "What do you mean?" Ariadne asked, her voice sharp. Mrs. Goodbody's lips curled into a cryptic smile. "Just an old rhyme, dearie. But wells and tubs, they hold secrets, don't they?" She shuffled away, her black cloak trailing behind her like a shadow. Ariadne's mind spun. Joyce's claim about a murder, dismissed as a childish lie, now felt like a key to this horror. Had she seen something real, something dangerous enough to cost her life? The festive mood of the party was gone, replaced by a suffocating dread that clung to the walls like the cobwebs. The pumpkins' grins seemed to mock the tragedy, their hollow eyes watching as the villagers whispered and pointed. Dr. Ferguson, the village physician, arrived, his face grim as he examined Joyce's body. He confirmed what Ariadne already knew. Joyce had been drowned, her lungs filled with water, her neck bearing faint marks that suggested force. "This was no accident," he said quietly, his words meant for Rowena, but reaching Ariadne's ears. The doctor's eyes met hers, and she saw the same question reflected there. Who could have done this, and why? Rowena's composure faltered, her hands twisting together. "This is terrible," she said, her voice trembling. "Poor Joyce. We must call the police." But Ariadne noticed the way Rowena's eyes darted to the crowd, as if searching for someone or avoiding someone. The novelist's instinct flared again. Rowena knew something, or suspected something, and Ariadne was determined to find out what. As the police was summoned and the hall cleared, Ariadne stood by the tub, her mind racing. The apples still bobbed, their innocence a cruel contrast to the violence they had witnessed. Joyce's ghost costume lay crumpled on the floor, a discarded shell. Ariadne's thoughts turned to Hercule Poirot, her friend and confidant, whose brilliant mind could untangle this knot of horror. She would send for him at once, for only Poirot could pierce the shadows that had descended on Woodler Common. The chapter closed with the distant wail of police sirens, their mournful cry blending with the wind that rattled the manor's windows. The Hallowe'en party, once a celebration of light and laughter, had become a crime scene, its festive mask torn away to reveal a darkness that would haunt the village for years to come. Joyce's death was a spark, igniting a mystery that would draw Poirot into a web of secrets, lies, and long-buried truths. Chapter 3. Poirot's arrival in the shadows. The moon hung low over Woodler Common, its pale light casting jagged shadows across the cobblestone lanes. The air was thick with the scent of damp leaves and wood smoke, a crisp October chill that seemed to whisper secrets. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective with a mind sharper than a guillotine, stepped off the late train from London, his polished shoes clicking softly against the platform, his moustache, impeccably groomed as always, twitched slightly as he inhaled the village's peculiar atmosphere, blend of rustic charm and something darker, something unspoken. Ariadne Oliver awaited him, her stout figure wrapped in a voluminous scarf that seemed to battle the night's cold with its sheer exuberance of color. Her hair, as unruly as her imagination, poked out beneath a woolen hat, and her eyes gleamed with a mix of relief and agitation. "Poirot, thank heaven you're here," she said, her voice a low, urgent hum. "This place, it's all wrong now. That poor girl, Joyce, drowned in an apple-bobbing tub, of all things. And her talk of murder before it happened, it's too ghastly." Poirot tilted his head, his green eyes catching the moonlight like polished jade. "Madame Oliver, you have summoned Hercule Poirot, and so the little grey cells, they are already at work. Tell me, what is this talk of murder, and why does it trouble you so?" They began to walk, Ariadne leading him through the village's winding streets, toward Rowena Drake's estate, where the tragedy had unfolded. The houses, quaint with their thatched roofs and ivy-clad walls, seemed to lean inward, as if guarding secret from prying eyes. Lanterns flickered in windows, their glow feeble against the encroaching darkness. Ariadne recounted the events of the Hallowe'en party, the children's games, the laughter, Joyce's bold claim about witnessing a murder years ago, and the chilling discovery of her body. Her face submerged in the tub, apples floating mockingly around her. She was only 13, Poirot, Ariadne said, her voice catching. A bit of a fibber, perhaps, but who would do such a thing? And why? Her talk of murder, everyone laughed it off, called it childish nonsense. But now, I can't shake the feeling she knew something real. Poirot's expression remained inscrutable, but his mind was already weaving a tapestry of possibilities. The young, they see more than we credit them for, Madame, a child's eyes. They do not filter the world as adults do. If Mademoiselle Joyce spoke of murder, we must assume there is a kernel of truth, however small, buried within her words. And now she is silenced. This is no coincidence. They reached the gates of Rowena Drake's estate, a sprawling manor house surrounded by manicured gardens that, in the moonlight, took on an almost spectral quality. The pumpkins lining the path, carved with grotesque faces, seemed to leer at Poirot, their candlelit grins casting eerie patterns on the gravel. The house itself was grand but somber, its windows dark save for a few glowing softly from within. A constable stood guard at the entrance, his face pale and drawn. "Mr. Poirot, sir," the constable said, tipping his hat. "Mrs. Drake's expecting you. It's been a right mess here, what with the girl's death and all." Poirot nodded, his gaze sweeping the scene. "Mercy, constable. I will require a moment to observe before we proceed. The setting, it speaks as loudly as any. Witness." He paused, taking in the details. The faint scuff marks on the path, the way the pumpkins were unevenly spaced, as if some had been moved in haste. The air carried a faint temps of cider and something metallic blood, perhaps, or merely the rust of autumn. Poirot's mind catalogued these fragments, each a piece of the puzzle he would soon assemble. Inside, the manor's grand hall was a study in contrasts. The remnants of the Hallowe'en party lingered streamers draped across the chandelier. A table cluttered with half-eaten sweets, and the apple-bobbing tub now cordoned off with rope, its water still and dark. Rowena Drake, a statuesque woman, with sharp features softened by a practiced smile, greeted them. Her composure was admirable, but Poirot noted the tightness in her jaw, the way her fingers clutched her shawl a fraction too tightly. "Mr. Poirot, thank you for coming, Rowena," said her voice smooth but tinged with strain. "This is a terrible tragedy. Joyce was spirited, but no one could have foreseen this." Poirot bowed slightly. "Madame Drake's tragedy is often the shadow cast by secrets. I will need to speak with everyone who was present at the party, and I will need the truth, however small or inconvenient it may seem." Rowena's smile faltered, but she nodded. "Of course, everyone is still here too, shaken to leave, most of them. You'll find them in the drawing room." The drawing room was a hive of nervous energy. Villagers and party guests sat in clusters, their faces a mix of grief, fear, and suspicion. Judith Butler, a striking woman with a quiet intensity, sat with her daughter, Miranda, a pale, wide-eyed girl of 12, who clutched a book of fairy tales as if it were a shield. Michael Garfield, the gardener, lounged by the fireplace, his handsome face unreadable but his eyes sharp, watching everyone. Elizabeth Whittaker, a schoolteacher with a stern demeanor, whispered to a nervous-looking young man Poirot later learned was Desmond Holland, a local clerk. The room buzzed with low voices, each conversation a thread in the web of Woodler Common's secrets. Ariadne introduced Poirot, and the room fell silent, all eyes on the small man with the impeccable suit, and piercing gaze. "Mies Amos," Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding. "A young girl has been taken from us, and her death, it is no accident. I am Hercule Poirot, and I will uncover the truth. But I will need your cooperation. Tell me, who among you heard Mademoiselle Joyce speak of a murder?" A murmur rippled through the room, but no one spoke at first. Finally, Judith Butler raised her head. Joyce was always telling stories. She said she saw a murder, but no one took her seriously. She was dramatic. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Dramatic, perhaps, but dead, most certainly. "And so, madame, I ask again, what did she say, precisely?" Judith hesitated, glancing at Miranda, who shrank deeper into her chair. "She said she saw something years ago, when she was younger. Something about a woman and a man in the quarry garden, but it was vague, and she clammed up when we pressed her." Poirot's moustache twitched. "The quarry garden. This is most interesting. And who else was present when she spoke?" Elizabeth Whittaker spoke up, her voice crisp. "Most of us were there. Ioe Michael, myself, a few children. Joyce was showing off, as usual. I told her to stop making things up. And yet," Poirot said softly, "she is no longer here to make things up. Tell me, Mademoiselle Whittaker, what do you know of this quarry garden?" Elizabeth's lips tightened. "It's just a garden. Michael tends it. It's beautiful, but there are stories, old ones, about things that happened there. Poirot turned to Michael Garfield, who met his gaze with a lazy smile. Monsieur Garfield, you are the gardener. What stories does Mademoiselle Whittaker speak of? Michael shrugged, his voice smooth as velvet. Village gossip, Mr. Poirot. People love to spin tales about the Quarra ghosts. Lovers, trysts, that sort of thing. It's just a place with flowers and stones. Poirot's smile was polite but cold. And yet a child is dead, and she spoke of this place. I think, perhaps, it is more than flowers and stones. The room grew tense, the air heavy with unspoken accusations. Poirot excused himself, asking Ariadne to show him the scene of the crime. The apple-bobbing tub stood in a corner of the hall, its water now still, reflecting the flickering candles. Poirot knelt beside it, his gloved fingers tracing the rim. Curious, he murmured. The tub is deep, but not so deep that a girl of 13 could not stand. And yet she drowned. This suggests force. Madame Oliver. Someone held her under. Ariadne shuddered. It's horrible. Who would do such a thing to a child? Poirot stood, brushing his hands together. Someone who feared what she knew, bore what she might say. We must learn more of this quarry garden and the murder she claimed to have seen. Tell me, who else in this village might know of its secrets? Ariadne hesitated, then lowered her voice. There's Mrs. Goodbody, a local woman who cleans houses. She was at the party, dressed as a witch. She's knows all the old stories, and she mentioned something about a pussy in the well when I spoke to her earlier. It gave me chills. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A witch, you say? Most intriguing. I will speak with this Mrs. Goodbody, and I will need to see the quarry garden myself. But first, let us return to the drawing-room. The faces there, they tell me much, even when their mouths do not. Back in the drawing-room, Poirot observed the guests with renewed focus. He noted the way Judith's hand rested protectively on Miranda's shoulder, the way Michael's smile never reached his eyes, the way Elizabeth Whittaker's gaze darted nervously to the door. The room was a chessboard, and Poirot was already planning his moves. As the night deepened, a sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, extinguishing a candle on the mantel. Miranda gasped, and Judith pulled her closer. Poirot's voice cut through the silence. Mies Amos, the truth, it is like the wind, cannot be stopped. And Hercule Poirot, he will find it, no matter how deeply it is buried. The chapter closed with the villagers dispersing, their faces etched with unease. Poirot stood alone in the hall, his silhouette framed by the pumpkin-lit glow. The mystery was only beginning, but already he sensed the threads of a dark tapestry weaving together. Tapestry of lies, fear, and a murder that refused to stay buried. The shadows of Woodler Common held their secrets tightly, but Poirot's little grey cells were sharper than any darkness. Chapter 4. Whispers of a past crime. The mist clung to Woodler Common like a shroud, curling round the gnarled oaks and seeping into the cracks of the village's ancient stone walls. Hercule Poirot, his black patterned leather shoes gleaming despite the damp, navigated the narrow path to the village hall with a measured step. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves, a fitting prelude to the task at hand. Joyce Reynolds' death had cast a pall over the Halloween festivities, and Poirot's sharp mind was already slicing through the fog of grief and suspicion that enveloped the villagers. Ariadne Oliver, her auburn scarf trailing like a comet's tail, hurried to keep pace beside him, her eyes darting nervously to the shadows. "Poirot, I can't shake it," Ariadne said, her voice low but urgent. "Joyce's claim about seeing a murder, it's absurd, isn't it? A child's fancy, purely. And yet," she trailed off, her fingers twisting the edge of her scarf. Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle signal of his amusement at her agitation. "Madame Oliver, the mind of a child is not always so fanciful as adults presume." Joyce Reynolds spoke with conviction. "Nan, and now she is dead. This is not coincidence. It is a thread, and we must pull it to see where it leads." The village hall loomed ahead, its ivy-clad facade glowing faintly under the weak November sun. Inside, the air was pale, heavy with the memory of last night's revelry turned tragedy. Poirot had requested a gathering of key figures from the Hallowe'en party, those who might have heard Joyce's boast or seen her final moments. The room was a patchwork of nervous faces. Rowena Drake, the poised hostess with her auburn hair pinned tightly, her smile a brittle mask. Judith Butler, pale and watchful, her daughter Miranda clinging to her side. Dr. Ferguson, the local physician, his glasses fogged from the cold. And Elizabeth Whittaker, the schoolteacher, whose stern gaze seemed to dissect every word spoken. Poirot stood at the center, his small frame commanding the room like a conductor before an orchestra. "Mies Amos," he began, his voice smooth as polished oak, "we are here to unravel a most tragic mystery. Joyce Reynolds, a child of this village, is dead, murdered, I believe, in the midst of a celebration meant for joy." She spoke of witnessing a murderer claim dismissed as fantasy. Yet I, Hercule Poirot, do not dismiss the words of a child so lightly. Tell me, who among you heard her speak of this? A ripple of unease passed through the group. Rowena Drake's fingers tightened. Around her teacup, the porcelain clinking faintly. "Joyce was always spinning tales," she said, her voice bright but strained. "She loved the attention. I heard her mention something about a murder, but it was so vague, childish nonsense. Really, I didn't think twice about it." Judith Butler's eyes flickered to her daughter, then back to Poirot. "Miranda was there when Joyce spoke," she said softly. "She told me Joyce was trying to impress the other children. Miranda didn't believe her, did you, darling?" Miranda, her dark hair falling in a curtain over her face, shook her head mutely. Poirot's gaze lingered on her, noting the way her small hands clutched her mother's sleeve. There was something in her silence, a weight that intrigued him. Dr. Ferguson cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. "I was tending to a sprained ankle across the room when Joyce made her little announcement. I didn't catch the details, but she seemed agitated, like she wanted to be heard but wasn't sure how to make it stick. Elizabeth with lips pursed. Joyce was a bright girl, but prone to exaggeration. She once claimed to have seen a ghost in the quarry garden. I told her to stop telling tales, but she was stubborn. If she saw something real, she never shared it with me. Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming like polished jet. Merci, madame. Et messieurs. Your accounts are most illuminating. But let us consider, if Joyce's claim was not mere fancy, then what murder might she have seen? We must look to the past of Woodler Common, to the shadows that linger in its corners. He turned to Ariadne, who had been scribbling notes in a small notebook, her pen scratching like a beetle on bark. Madame Oliver, you have lived among these people for some weeks. Have you heard whispers of any unusual events? A death, perhaps, or a disappearance that left questions unanswered? Ariadne hesitated, her brow furrowing. There was talk of an au pair, Olga Semenoff, who vanished a few years back. She worked for Mrs. Llewellyn's Mythe, the widow who owned the estate before Rowena. People said Olga ran off with a lover, but, well, the village loves its gossip. I didn't think much of it until now. Poirot's moustache quivered, a sign of his quickening interest. Olga Semenoff, he murmured, a name that carries weight. We must learn more of this woman and her fate. The investigation took Poirot to the village's modest police station, where retired Superintendent Spence awaited him. Spence, a broad man with a face like weathered granite, had agreed to assist Poirot, his respect for the detective outweighing his reluctance to revisit old cases. The station was a cramped affair, its walls lined with faded photographs and yellowed reports. A single window let in a sliver of grey light, casting long shadows across the desk where Spence sat. A file opened before him. Olga Semenoff, Spence said, his voice a low rumble. She was a Russian girl, about 22, came to work for Mrs. Llewellyn's Mythe 4 years ago. Quiet, kept to herself, but clever. She disappeared one autumn, not long after the old lady died. The official report said she left for London, maybe even back to Russia, but no one could confirm it. Her belongings were gone, but there was no note, no trace. The village assumed she'd had enough of small-town life. Poirot's fingers tapped a rhythm on the desk, his mind racing. And yet, Monsieur Spence, you do not sound convinced by this assumption. Spence leaned back, his chair creaking. There were rumors. Mrs. Llewellyn Smyther's will caused a stir. She left a sizable sum to Olga, then changed it to benefit Rowena Drake. Some said Olga forged the original will, but there was no proof. When she vanished, it was convenient for some. Too convenient, if you ask me. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Convenient for whom? Spence shrugged. Rowena got the estate. Michael Garfield, the gardener, was close to Olga too. Close, some said. And there was talk of a solicitor's clerk, Andrew Kane, who was stabbed around the same time. His death was ruled a robbery gone wrong. But the timing, it's a knot I never untangled. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but piercing. A knot, Monsieur Spence, is merely a challenge for the little grey cells. Tell me, What do we know of this Andrew Kane? Spence flipped through the file, pulling out a faded photograph of a young man with sharp cheekbones and a nervous smile. Kane was a clerk for the solicitor who handled Mrs. Llewellyn Smyther's affairs, stabbed in an alley near the Quarry Garden late at night. The police found no witnesses, no clear motive beyond theft. His wallet was missing, but his watch and ring were left behind. Odd for a robbery. Poirot's fingers steepled beneath his chin. Odd, indeed. And the Quarry Garden, why does it appear again and again in these tales? Spence's eyes darkened. That place has always been trouble. It's beautiful, mind Umical Garfield's work, but there's something about it. Locals avoid it after dark. Say it's haunted. Haunted, Poirot repeated, a faint smile playing on his lips. The superstitions of the English countryside are most charming. But I, Hercule Poirot, am not swayed by ghosts. I seek facts, and the facts tell me that Joyce Reynolds saw something, or heard something, that led to her death. We must uncover what it was. The afternoon found Poirot and Ariadne at the village pub. The Black Cat, a low-ceilinged establishment with walls blackened by years of hearth smoke. The patrons, a mix of farmers and shopkeepers, eyed the newcomers with a blend of curiosity and suspicion. Poirot ordered a tisane, much to the barman's confusion, while Ariadne sipped a cider, her notebook open on the scarred wooden table. "I've been thinking," Ariadne said, her voice hushed. If Joyce really saw a murder, it could have been Olga's or Andrew Kane's. But how would a child stumble across something like that? And why speak of it now, years later? Poirot's eyes gleamed in the dim light. A child sees what adults overlook, madame. Joyce was 13, curious, perhaps prone to wandering where she should not. The Quarry Garden, for instance, is a place of beauty, but also of secrets. If she saw something there, or overheard a conversation, it might have lain dormant in her mind until the Hallowe'en party gave her a stage. Ariadne shivered, though the fire crackled nearby. It's eerie, Poirot. The idea that a child could carry such a secret, not even knowing which wait, and then to die for it. Before Poirot could respond, a shadow fell across their table. Mrs. Goodbody, the village cleaner, stood before them, her black shawl draped like wings. Her face, lined with years of toil, was alight with a strange intensity. "Heard you're asking about Olga," she said, her voice a low rasp. "You'd do well to leave that alone, Mr. Poirot. Some secrets are best left buried." Poirot's gaze was unyielding. "Madame Goodbody, I am Hercule Poirot, and I do not leave secrets buried when they lead to murder. What do you know of Olga Seminoff?" Mrs. Goodbody's eyes darted to the corners of the pub, as if expecting the walls to listen. She was a good girl, Olga, too good for this place. She saw things, heard things, in that big house. Things about money, about wills. And then she was gone, like a puff of smoke. The Quarry Garden. That's where you'll find your answers. But mind you don't stir up what's sleeping there. Ariadne's pen froze. "Sleeping? What do you mean?" Mrs. Goodbody's lips curled into a grim smile. Pussy in the well, that's what they say. An old rhyme, older than me. Pussy in the well, who put her in? Little Johnny Green. It's a warning, Mrs. Oliver. Things go into that quarry and don't come out. Poirot's expression remained impassive, but his mind was a whirl of connections. Merci, Madame Goodbody. Your words are most evocative. I shall visit this quarry garden myself. As Mrs. Goodbody shuffled away, Ariadne leaned closer. Poirot, she's terrifying. Do you think she's hinting at something real, or is she just playing the village, which Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Every village has its witch, madame, and every witch has her truths. We shall see what the quarry garden reveals. The quarry garden was a place of stark beauty, its paths winding through jagged stone outcrops and overgrown with wild roses. The late afternoon sun cast long, claw-like shadows, and the air carried a faint hum, as if the earth itself were whispering. Poirot, dressed incongruously in his immaculate suit, moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the ground. Ariadne trailed behind, clutching her scarf against the chill. "This place gives me the creeps," she muttered. "It's too quiet, like it's holding its breath." Poirot paused beside a cluster of stones arranged in a rough circle. "Observe, madame, the earth here is disturbed, as if recently turned." And there he pointed to a glint of color. Caught in a thorn bush, kneeling, he extracted a faded ribbon, its once bright blue dulled by time and weather. Ariadne gasped. "That could be Olga's. I remember her wearing a blue ribbon in her hair when I saw her at the market years ago." Poirot tucked the ribbon into his pocket, his expression grave. "It is a small thing, but small things lead to great truths. If Olga Semenoff met her end here, and if Joyce Reynolds saw or heard something of it, then we are close to the heart of this mystery." As they left the garden, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and ash. Distant owl hooted, its cry echoing like a warning. Poirot's mind was alive with possibilities, each one a thread in the tapestry of murder. Joyce's death, Olga's disappearance, Andrew Kane's stabbing all were linked, he was certain, by a single malevolent hand. The quarry garden held the key, and Poirot would not rest until he unlocked its secrets. That evening, Poirot sat in his rented room at the village inn, a single candle casting flickering shadows on the walls. He spread Spence's files across, put the table, his fingers tracing names and dates. Olga Semenoff, Andrew Kane, Mrs. Llewellyn Smythe, their stories intertwined like vines. Each death or disappearance a knot in the pattern. Joyce Reynolds had stumbled upon one of these knots, and it had cost her life. A knock at the door broke his reverie. Ariadne entered, her face pale. "Poirot, I've just heard something from one of the children at the party. Leopold, Joyce's brother, was asking questions about Olga last week. He was poking around the quarry garden, too. Do you think he knows something?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the candlelight. "Leopold Reynolds," he murmured. "A boy who asks questions is a boy in danger. We must speak with him, madame, and soon." For if the killer struck once to silence Joyce, they may strike again to silence her brother. The night deepened outside, the wind carrying whispers of the past. Poirot's mind was a crucible, refining clues into truth. The quarry garden, the ribbon, the rumors of a forged will pointed to a crime hidden in plain sight. Joyce had seen something, or someone, and her death was the price of her knowledge. As Poirot closed his eyes, the image of the quarry garden lingered, its stone silent witnesses to a truth he would soon uncover. The afternoon found Poirot and Ariadne at the village pub. The Black Cat, a low-ceilinged establishment with walls blackened by years of hearth smoke. The patrons, a mix of farmers and shopkeepers, eyed the newcomers with a blend of curiosity and suspicion. Poirot ordered a tisane, much to the barman's confusion, while Ariadne sipped a cider, her notebook open on the scarred wooden table. "I've been thinking," Ariadne said, her voice hushed. "If Joyce really saw a murder, it could have been Olga's or Andrew Kane's. But how would a child stumble across something like that? And why speak of it now, years later?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "A child sees what adults overlook, madame." Joyce was 13, curious, perhaps prone to wandering where she should not. The quarry garden, for instance, is a place of beauty, but also of secrets. If she saw something there, or overheard a conversation, it might have lain dormant in her mind until the Hallowe'en party gave her a stage. Ariadne shivered, though the fire crackled nearby. It's eerie, Poirot. The idea that a child could carry such a secret, not even knowing which wait, and then to die for it. Before Poirot could respond, a shadow fell across their table. Mrs. Goodbody, the village cleaner, stood before them, her black shawl draped like wings. Her face, lined with years of toil, was alight with a strange intensity. "Heard you're asking about Olga," she said, her voice a low rasp. "You'd do well to leave that alone, Mr. Poirot. Some secrets are best left buried." Poirot's gaze was unyielding. "Madame Goodbody, I am Hercule Poirot, and I do not leave secrets buried when they lead to murder. What do you know of Olga Seminoff?" Mrs. Goodbody's eyes darted to the corners of the pub, as if expecting the walls to listen. She was a good girl, Olga, too good for this place. She saw things, heard things, in that big house. Things about money, about wills. And then she was gone, like a puff of smoke. The quarry garden. That's where you'll find your answers. But mind you don't stir up what's sleeping there. Ariadne's pen froze. "Sleeping? What do you mean?" Mrs. Goodbody's lips curled into a grim smile. "Pussy in the well, that's what they say. An old rhyme, older than me. Pussy in the well, who put her in? Little Johnny Green. It's a warning, Mrs. Oliver. Things go into that quarry and don't come out." Poirot's expression remained impassive, but his mind was a whirl of connections. "Merci, Madame Goodbody. Your words are most evocative. I shall visit this quarry garden myself." As Mrs. Goodbody shuffled away, Ariadne leaned closer. "Poirot, she's terrifying. Do you think she's hinting at something real, or is she just playing the village, which, Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Every village has its witch, madame, and every witch has her truths. We shall see what the Quarry Garden reveals." The Quarry Garden was a place of stark beauty, its paths winding through jagged stone outcrops and overgrown with wild roses. The late afternoon sun cast long, claw-like shadows, and the air carried a faint hum, as if the earth itself were whispering. Poirot, dressed incongruously in his immaculate suit, moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the ground. Ariadne trailed behind, clutching her scarf against the chill. "This place gives me the creeps," she muttered. "It's too quiet, like it's holding its breath." Poirot paused beside a cluster of stones arranged in a rough circle. "Observe, madame, the earth here is disturbed, as if recently turned." And there he pointed to a glint of color. Caught in a thorn bush, kneeling, he extracted a faded ribbon, its once bright blue dulled by time and weather. Ariadne gasped. "That could be Olga's. I remember her wearing a blue ribbon in her hair when I saw her at the market years ago." Poirot tucked the ribbon into his pocket, his expression grave. "It is a small thing, but small things lead to great truths. If Olga Semenoff met her end here, and if Joyce Reynolds saw or heard something of it, then we are close to the heart of this mystery." As they left the garden, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and ash. Distant owl hooted, its cry echoing like a warning. Poirot's mind was alive with possibilities, each one a thread in the tapestry of murder. Joyce's death, Olga's disappearance, Andrew Kane's stabbing, all were linked, he was certain, by a single malevolent hand. The Quarry Garden held the key, and Poirot would not rest until he unlocked its secrets. That evening, Poirot sat in his rented room at the village inn, a single candle casting flickering shadows on the walls. He spread Spence's files across, put the table, his fingers tracing names and dates. Olga Semenoff, Andrew Kane, Mrs. Llewellyn Smythe, their stories intertwined like vines. Each death or disappearance a knot in the pattern. Joyce Reynolds had stumbled upon one of these knots, and it had cost her life. A knock at the door broke his reverie. Ariadne entered, her face pale. "Poirot, I've just heard something from one of the children at the party. Leopold, Joyce's brother, was asking questions about Olga last week. He was poking around the Quarry Garden, too. Do you think he knows something?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the candlelight. "Leopold Reynolds," he murmured. "A boy who asks questions is a boy in danger. We must speak with him, madame, and soon. For if the killer struck once to silence Joyce, they may strike again to silence her brother." The night deepened outside, the wind carrying whispers of the past. Poirot's mind was a crucible, refining clues into truth. The Quarry Garden, the ribbon, the rumors of a forged will pointed to a crime hidden in plain sight. Joyce had seen something, or someone, and her death was the price of her knowledge. As Poirot closed his eyes, the image of the Quarry Garden lingered, its stone silent witnesses to a truth he would soon uncover. As Poirot walked back toward the high street, the fog parted briefly, revealing the silhouette of the church spire, piercing the sky like a needle. A single crow perched atop it, its call echoing through the mist. Poirot paused, his hand tightening on his cane. The village of Woodler Common was a puzzle, its pieces scattered across time and memory, and he sensed that the next piece lay just beyond his grasp, waiting in the shadows of the quarry garden. The day wore on, and Poirot's inquiries led Pym to the village pub, the Black Cat, a low-ceilinged establishment where locals gathered to swap stories over pints of ale. The interior was dim, lit by lanterns that cast wavering shadows on the walls, and the air smelled of wood smoke and stale beer. Poirot, ever out of place in such rustic settings, drew curious glances as he settled at a corner table, his notebook open before him. The publican, a burly man named Tom Hargreaves, approached with a weary smile. "You're that detective, then? Come about the Reynolds girl, I reckon." "Precisement," Poirot replied, his tone polite but probing. "I seek to understand the currents of this village. Tell me, Monsieur Hargreaves, what do you know of Olga Siminoff, the au pair who vanished?" Tom's smile faltered, and he busied himself wiping a glass. "Olga, that's old news. Came to work for the Llewelyn-Smythe widow, then up and left. Folk said she had a sweetheart somewhere, maybe went back to her own country." "Why, do you ask?" Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "Let us say I am interested in stories that linger, monsieur, and I have heard whispers that Olga's departure was not so simple. Did she have enemies here, or perhaps friends who were too close?" Tom glanced around, ensuring no one was within earshot. "Look, I don't like speaking ill of folk, but Olga was a bit of a mystery. Kept to herself, mostly, but she was friendly with Michael Garfield, the gardener up at the Drake estate. Some said they were sweet on each other, but Michael's a charmer, always got a lass or two trailing after him. Then there was that business with Mrs. Llewelyn-Smythe's will. Folk reckoned Olga Mitov had a hand in it, but nothing came of it before she vanished." Poirot's pencil paused over his notebook. "A will, you say? And what was this business?" Tom shrugged, his voice lowering. "Mrs. Llewelyn-Smythe was a rich old bird, left a fortune when she died. Word was she'd changed her will to favor Olga, but then the will went missing, and the old one stood. Rowena Drake got the lot, being family. Some folk thought Olga might have forged it, but she was gone before anyone could prove it." Poirot's mind sparked with connections. A forged will, a missing au pair, and now a murdered girl who claimed to have seen a murderer. Was a web, and at its center he sensed Rowena Drake and Michael Garfield. But how did Joyce fit in? Had she stumbled upon evidence of Olga's fate, or was her claim a childish fabrication that had cost her her life? "Thank you, Monsieur Hargreaves," Poirot said, closing his notebook. "Your candor is most helpful. One final question. Have you heard the rhyme, 'Pussy in the Well'?" Tom's face paled slightly. "Aye, it's an old one. Kids sing it, but it's got a dark edge. They say it's about hiding something or someone where Find M. Why, do you ask? Poirot smiled thinly. Merely a curiosity, monsieur. I find that old rhymes often carry old truths. Leaving the pub, Poirot's thoughts churned. Mrs. Goodbody's cryptic warning, Tom's tale of a missing will, and the spectre of Olga Semenoff painted a picture of a village steeped in secrets. The quarry garden loomed in his mind, a place where beauty masked something sinister. He resolved to visit it at dusk, when the light might reveal what the day concealed, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the village in shades of amber and grey. Poirot made his way to the quarry garden. The path wound through a copse of twisted trees, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. The garden itself was a paradox, a lush oasis carved from the harsh stone of an old quarry, its flower-beds meticulously tended by Michael Garfield. Yet, as Poirot stepped into its heart, he felt a chill that had little to do with the evening air. The garden was silent, save for the rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. Poirot's eyes scanned the landscape, noting the orderly rows, buff roses, the stone bench overlooking a small pond, and a cluster of willows that seemed to whisper in the breeze. Then he saw it a patch of earth near the pond, slightly raised, as if recently disturbed. Kneeling, he brushed the soil with his gloved hand, revealing a glint of metal beneath. It was a ribbon, faded but unmistakable, its pattern matching, one described as belonging to Olga Semenoff. Poirot's heart quickened. This was no coincidence. The quarry garden was more than a beauty spot. It was a grave, or, at the very least, a hiding place. Mrs. Goodbody's rhyme echoed in his mind. Pussy in the well, who put her in war. If Olga's body lay here, or some trace, bar of her fate, then Joyce's claimed her death made chilling sense. Someone had ensured her silence, and Poirot suspected that someone was close to the heart of Woodler-Common's elite. As he rose, a shadow moved among the willows. Poirot's hand tightened on his cane, but he kept his voice steady. Who is there? Show yourself. S'il vous plaît. A figure emerged, tall and lithe, his hair catching the last rays of sunlight. Michael Garfield, the gardener, smiled with a charm that did not reach his eyes. Monsieur Poirot, out for an evening stroll. The garden's lovely at dusk, isn't it? Poirot's gaze was piercing. Indeed, Monsieur Garfield, it is a place of great beauty, and perhaps great secrets. Tell me, do you often work here alone? Michael's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly. A gardener's work is solitary, monsieur, but I assure you, there's nothing here but flowers and hard work. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, but I find that beauty often hides truth, and truth, monsieur, is what I seek. Michael's eyes flickered, and for a moment Poirot thought he saw a crack in the man's polished facade. But Michael only nodded, tipping his cap. Good luck with your truth, monsieur. Mind the paths, they're treacherous in the dark. As Michael vanished into the shadows, Poirot stood alone in the quarry garden, the ribbon clutched in his gloved hand. The wind rose, carrying the faint scent of decay, and the willows seemed to sigh with secrets they could not yet tell. Mrs. Good warning rang in his ears, and Poirot knew he was close to a truth that someone would kill to protect. The chapter closed with a chilling breeze sweeping through the garden, rustling the leaves and extinguishing a distant jack-o'-lantern's flame. Poirot turned back toward the village, his resolve unshaken. The quarry garden held answers, and he would return, armed with the knowledge that Woodler Common's festive mask concealed a darkness that only he could unmask. Chapter 6. Shadows in the quarry garden. The quarry garden lay on the edge of Woodler Common, a place where nature and neglect conspired to weave an air of mystery. Its tangled vines and crumbling stone walls, half reclaimed by moss, seemed to whisper secrets to anyone who lingered too long. The October air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and as Hercule Poirot stepped onto the uneven path leading into the garden, the world seemed to hush, as if holding its breath. The moon, a sickle of silver, cast long, jagged shadows across the ground, and the faint rustle of leaves underfoot was the only sound breaking the stillness. Poirot, impeccably dressed, despite the rugged terrain, adjusted his hat and surveyed the scene with his sharp, bird-like eyes. This was no ordinary garden, it was a stage, and he suspected it had witnessed a performance far darker than any Hallowe'en revelry. The garden belonged to Rowena Drake's estate, though it was rarely tended and even more rarely visited. Local legend claimed it was once a quarry, its stones hewn to build the grand houses of Woodler Common. But now it was a wilderness of gnarled trees and hidden corners. Ariadne Oliver had mentioned it in passing, her voice tinged with unease, as the place where Olga Semenoff, the missing au pair, was last seen. Joyce Reynolds, too, had spoken of wandering here, her childish boasts about a murder perhaps rooted in something she'd glimpsed among these shadows. Poirot's moustache twitched as he considered the possibilities. A child's imagination could embellish, but it rarely invented outright. Somewhere in this garden, he was certain, lay a clue to the tragedy that had shattered the Hallowe'en party. He moved deeper into the garden, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the soft earth. The path wound past a cluster of yew trees, their dark needles forming a natural canopy that blocked out the moonlight. Poirot paused, his senses alert. A faint scent, something sharp, metallic, cut through the earthy aroma. He crouched, his gloved fingers brushing the ground near a patch of disturbed soil. The earth was loose, as if recently turned, and a glint of something caught his eye. He reached down and retrieved a small, tattered ribbon. Its once vibrant red faded to a dull crimson. It was frayed, stained with mud, but its presence was no accident. Poirot slipped it into his pocket, his mind already turning over its significance. A ribbon could belong to any one, a child, a woman, a careless guest, but in a place like this it felt like a breadcrumb in a fairy tale, leading to something sinister. Bonjour, Monsieur Poirot, came a smooth, almost musical voice from behind him. Poirot turned, his expression composed but his eyes narrowing. Standing at the edge of the path was Michael Garfield, the gardener Rowena Drake employed to maintain her estate. He was a striking figure, tall and lean, with dark hair that fell in careless waves and eyes that seemed to hold a private amusement. His clothes were practical corduroy trousers, a worn jacket, but there was an elegance to his movements, as if he were more artist than laborer. He carried a pair of pruning shears, their blades catching the moonlight with a cold gleam. "Monsieur Garfield," Poirot said, rising to his full height, which, though modest, carried an air of authority. "You are abroad late, none. The garden. It is not so inviting at this hour." Michael smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of his lips. "The garden's at its best in the dark, don't you think? The shadows give it character. Besides, I like to check on things after hours. Plants need tending, even when the world's asleep." Poirot tilted his head, studying the man. There was something about Michael Garfield that set his nerves on edge, not overt menace, but a subtle discord, like a note played slightly out of tune. "And what do you tend here in this quarry garden? It seems untamed." "Oh, it's wild," Michael agreed, stepping closer. His eyes flicked to the spot where Poirot had found the ribbon, though his expression remained unchanged. "But wild things have their own beauty. This place has history stories in every stone. You're a detective, aren't you? I bet you can feel it." Poirot's smile was thin. "The history, it speaks. But it is the stories of the living that interest me most. Tell me, Monsieur Garfield, did you know Joyce Reynolds?" Michael's smile faltered just for a moment before he recovered. "Joyce, sure, I knew her. Chatty kid, always poking around where she shouldn't. She liked the garden. Used to come here with her friends, playing hide-and-seek or whatever. Kids do shame what happened to her." "Indeed," Poirot said, his voice soft but probing. "A shame that is perhaps not so simple. She spoke of a murder, you know. A curious thing for a child to say, unless she had seen something or someone." Michael's grip on the pruning shears tightened, though his face remained relaxed. "Kids say all sorts of things to get attention. Joyce was no different. She probably made it up to impress that writer friend of yours, Mrs. Oliver." "Perhaps," Poirot conceded, his eyes never leaving Michael's. "But the imagination of a child. It is like a sponge, it absorbs what it sees, even if it does not understand. This garden, it is a place where secrets might be seen. None." Michael laughed, a low, throaty sound that seemed to blend with the rustling leaves. "You're a poetic one, Mr. Poirot. This garden's just a garden, pretty in the day, spooky at night. If Joyce saw something, it was probably just shadows playing tricks." Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, but his mind was far from at ease. Michael Garfield was too smooth, too quick with his answers. The garden, with its hidden corners, its tangled roots, felt like an extension of the man himself, beautiful, but with something dark lurking beneath. Poirot decided to press further. "You were at the Hallowe'en party, I understand. Did you see Joyce that evening?" Michael shrugged, leaning against a gnarled tree. "I was there, helping Rowena set up. Saw Joyce early on, running around with the other kids. Didn't notice her after that, not until he trailed off, his expression darkening. Well, you know what happened. Poirot said, his voice almost a whisper. I know what happened, but I wish to know why. Tell me, Monsieur Garfield, what is it about this garden that draws you so? You speak of it as if it were alive. Michael's eyes gleamed, and for a moment Poirot thought he saw something unguarded in them, a flash of intensity, almost obsession. It's a place of possibilities, Michael said. You can lose yourself here, or find something new. It's where I come to think, to dream. Not everyone gets it, but I think you might, Mr. Poirot. You strike me as someone who sees more than most. Poirot's moustache twitched again, a sign of his amusement and suspicion. I see what is there and what is not there. And in this garden I see absences, things that should be, but are not. Like Mademoiselle Olga Semenoff, perhaps. The name hung in the air like a spectre. Michael's smile vanished, replaced by a guarded look. Olga, the au pair. That was years ago. She left town, didn't she? People move on. Some move on, Poirot said, his tone gentle but unyielding, and some do not. It is curious, is it not, that Joyce spoke of a murder, and now we speak, of a woman who vanished. The Quarry Garden, it seems, is a place of many departures. Michael straightened, his casual demeanor slipping. You're fishing, Mr. Poirot. If you've got questions about Olga, ask the villagers. They love their gossip. Me, I just tend the roses. Roses, Poirot repeated, glancing at a nearby bush, its blooms wilted and blackened by the autumn chill. They are beautiful, but they have thorns. One must be careful not to be pricked. Michael met his gaze, and for a moment the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Then the gardener smiled again, though it didn't reach his eyes. Good advice, Mr. Poirot. I'll leave you to your walk. The garden's full of surprises. Watch your step. With that, he turned and vanished into the shadows, his footsteps fading into the night. Poirot stood alone, the ribbon in his pocket seeming to burn against his skin. He knew Michael Garfield was more than a gardener. The man was a puzzle, a blend of charm and secrecy, and this garden was his domain. But what had Joyce seen here, and what had Michael seen or done? Poirot resumed his exploration, his mind racing. The Quarry Garden was a labyrinth of paths and alcoves, each turn revealing a new facet of its eerie beauty. He passed a crumbling stone fountain, its basin filled with stagnant water that reflected the moon like a clouded eye. Nearby, a cluster of wildflowers swayed in the breeze, their petals pale and ghostly. Poirot's eyes scanned every detail, searching for anything out of place. He was no botanist, but he knew the value of observation. The garden was a canvas, and someone had painted a crime upon it. As he rounded a bend, he noticed a narrow path leading to a sunken clearing, half hidden by overgrown shrubs. Something about it drew him, an instinct, perhaps honed by years of unraveling mysteries. He descended carefully, his cane tapping the ground for balance. The clearing was small, ringed by jagged stones that jutted from the earth like ancient teeth. In the center stood a single tree, its branches twisted into unnatural shapes, as if contorted by some unseen force. Beneath it, the ground was uneven, a patch of earth more disturbed than the rest. Poirot knelt again, his gloved hands probing the soil. It was loose, too loose, as if it had been dug up and hastily replaced. He sat back on his heels, his mind assembling the pieces, the ribbon, the disturbed earth, Michael Garfield's evasive answers. Hall pointed to something hidden here. Olga Semyonov's disappearance loomed large in his thoughts. Had Joyce stumbled upon this very spot, seen something she shouldn't have? A body, perhaps, or a meeting between conspirators. The garden was a place of secrets, and Poirot was determined to unearth them. A sudden sound, a snap of a tear him from his thoughts. He rose, his hand tightening on his cane. The garden was silent again, but the air felt charged, as if someone were watching. "Who is there?" he called, his voice steady but commanding. No answer came, only the rustle of leaves, but Poirot's senses were alight. He scanned the shadows, his eyes catching a flicker of movement near the fountain. A figure, small and quick, darted behind a tree. "Mademoiselle," Poirot called, his tone softer now. "There is no need to hide. Hercule Poirot is a friend to those who seek the truth." A moment passed, then another, before a small figure emerged from the shadows. It was Miranda Butler, Judith's daughter, her pale face almost luminous in the moonlight. Her eyes were wide, her hands clutching a shawl around her shoulders. She looked like a wisp of a girl, fragile yet defiant, as if she carried a weight far heavier than her years. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't mean to spy. I come here sometimes to think. It's quiet." Poirot approached her slowly, his expression kind but searching. "The quarry garden is no place for a young lady at night, Mademoiselle Miranda. It is full of shadows, and not all are friendly." Miranda's lips quivered, but she held his gaze. "I know. That's why I come here. It's where I feel close to things." To her, Poirot's voice was gentle, but his mind sharpened. "Who do you speak of?" Ma petite Miranda hesitated, her eyes darting to the disturbed patch of earth. "Olga," she said at last, her voice barely audible. "She was kind to me. She used to tell me stories about faraway places. Then she was gone, and no one would say why." Poirot's heart quickened, but he kept his expression calm. "You knew Mademoiselle Semyonoff? This is most interesting. Tell me, what do you remember of her?" Miranda wrapped her shawl tighter, as if warding off a chill that wasn't there. "She worked for Mrs. Llewellyn Smythe, the old lady who lived at the big house. She was nice, always smiling. But then she stopped coming, and people said she left. I didn't believe them. She wouldn't just leave without saying goodbye." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Miranda's connection to Olga was unexpected, a thread he hadn't anticipated. And you come to this garden because of her. Why here, mademoiselle?" Miranda's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. "Because this is where I saw her last. She was here with someone. I didn't see who, but they were arguing. I was scared, so I hid. Then she was gone, and I never saw her again." Poirot's pulse quickened. This was no childish fancy. Miranda had witnessed something real, something dangerous. "You are very brave to tell me this," he said, his voice soothing. "But you must be careful, mademoiselle. This garden, it holds secrets, and secrets can be dangerous. Tell me, did Joyce ever come here with you?" Miranda nodded, her expression haunted. Sometimes she liked to explore, to make up stories. She said she saw something once, something bad. I told her not to tell anyone, but she didn't listen. She wanted everyone to think she was important. Poirot's mind snapped into focus. Joyce's boast about a murder, dismissed as a lie, was beginning to take shape as truth. Miranda's words suggested she and Joyce had shared a secret, one that had cost Joyce her life. The quarry garden was no longer just a setting. It was the heart of the mystery, a place where past and present crimes intertwined. "Come," Poirot said, offering Miranda his arm. "It is not safe for you here. I will escort you home to your mother. But you must promise me, mademoiselle, to speak of this to no one else." "Not yet." Miranda nodded, her small hand trembling as she took his arm. As they walked back through the garden, the shadows seemed to close in around them, the air thick with unspoken truths. Poirot's mind was a whirlwind of connections: disappearance, Joyce's murder, Michael Garfield's elusive charm, and now Miranda's fragile testimony. The ribbon in his pocket felt heavier, a tangible link to the past. He glanced back at the disturbed patch of earth, its secrets still buried but no longer invisible. The quarry garden had spoken, and Hercule Poirot was listening. Chapter 7. The village's buried secrets. The autumn mist clung to Woodler Common like a spectral shroud, curling round the gnarled oaks and seeping into the cracks of the village's ancient stone walls. Hercule Poirot, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the damp earth, stood at the edge of the churchyard, his grey eyes scanning the horizon. The village, with its quaint cottages and ivy-draped fences, seemed to hum with a quiet unease, as if the very stones whispered secrets they dared not voice aloud. The Hallowe'en Party's grim aftermath. Joyce Reynolds' lifeless body in the apple-bobbing tub had cast a pall over the festivities, and now, with each passing hour, Poirot felt the weight of hidden truths pressing closer. He adjusted his scarf against the chill and murmured to himself, "The village. It is like a puzzle box. Each piece fits, but only if one knows the trick to unlock it." His investigation had already unearthed whispers of a past crimen, au pair, Olga Semenov, vanished without a trace. But the villagers' guarded glances and clipped responses suggested a deeper, more tangled web. Today he would pry open that box. No matter how stubbornly it resisted, Poirot's first stop was the vicarage, a modest building nestled beside the church. its windows glowing faintly in the morning haze. The vicar, Reverend Thomas Hargrove, was a wiry man with a nervous habit of adjusting his spectacles. He greeted Poirot with a strained smile, ushering him into a parlor cluttered with books and faded hymnal. The air smelled of old paper and wax polish, tinged with the faint sweetness of decaying roses in a vase by the window. "Monsieur Poirot," Hargrove began, his voice tremulous. "This tragedy with young Joyce, it's shaken us all. Woodler Common is a peaceful place, or so we thought." Poirot inclined his head, his moustache twitching slightly. "Peaceful, perhaps, but even the quietest places harbor shadows. Reverend, tell me, what do you know of Olga Semyonovna?" The vicar's fingers froze on his spectacles, his eyes darting to the window as if expecting someone to be watching. Olga. She was, well, a kind girl, I suppose. Worked for Mrs. Llewellyn's Mythe before her death. Then she just left. No one knows where. No one. Poirot's tone was gentle but probing, like a surgeon's scalpel. In a village such as this, where every whisper travels, surely someone saw something. Hargrove shifted uncomfortably, his chair creaking. There were rumors, of course. Some said she ran off with a lover. Others, well, they thought she might have met with foul play. But there was no proof, nothing concrete. Poirot leaned forward, his gaze unyielding. "And what do you think, Reverend? Did Olga Semyonovna leave of her own accord, or did the shadows of Woodler Common claim her?" The vicar's face paled, and he busied himself with a stack of papers. I don't speculate, Monsieur Poirot. It's not my place. But I will say, this village has its secrets, old grudges, hidden sins. You'd do well to speak with Elizabeth Whittaker. She's taught at the school for decades, knows everyone's history. Poirot nodded, filing the name away. "Merci, Reverend. Your candor is most helpful. I shall seek out Mademoiselle Whittaker." As he stepped back into the mist, Poirot's mind churned. The vicar's unease was palpable, a thread to tug. But it was the mention of Elizabeth Whittaker that intrigued him most. A school-teacher, privy to the village's pulse, might be key to unlocking its past. The schoolhouse stood at the edge of the village, a squat brick building with a sagging roof and windows smudged with children's fingerprints. Elizabeth Whittaker was sweeping the porch when Poirot arrived, her movements brisk and precise, like a metronome. She was a tall woman, her grey hair pulled into a severe bun, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She regarded Poirot with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, as if sizing up an opponent. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, pausing her sweeping. "Mrs. Oliver said you'd come poking about. I suppose you're here about Joyce." "And more," Poirot replied, his voice smooth as velvet. I'm interested in the history of Woodler Common, the incidents that linger in its memory. Tell me, Mademoiselle Whittaker, what do you recall of Olga Semyonovna?" Elizabeth's broom stilled, her knuckles whitening on the handle. "Olga. That was years ago. She was a quiet girl, kept to herself. Worked for Mrs. Llewellyn's Mythe until the old woman died. Then she vanished. People assumed she went back to her own country. Assumed. Poirot's eyebrow arched. Assumptions are dangerous. None. Especially when a young girl disappears and no one asks questions. Elizabeth's lips thinned. People asked Monsieur Poirot. But Mrs. Llewellyn-Smythe's death was a scandal in itself. There was talk of a forged will. Accusations flying everywhere. Olga got caught up in it, poor thing. Some said she was involved, others that she was just a scapegoat. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A forged will, you say? Most interesting. And who benefited from this irregularity? Elizabeth hesitated, her gaze flickering toward the village square, where a group of children played near a pile of pumpkins. Rowena Drake, for one. She inherited a good portion of the estate, but you'd best ask her yourself. She doesn't take kindly to gossip. Gossip, mademoiselle, is often the shadow of truth, Poirot said, tipping his hat. I shall speak with Madame Drake. But first, tell me, did Joyce Reynolds ever speak of Olga, or this will? Elizabeth frowned, her brow furrowing. Joyce was a fanciful child, always spinning tales. She did mention something odd a few weeks ago, about seeing something in the quarry garden. I thought it was just her imagination, but now her voice trailed off, her eyes distant. Poirot pressed gently. And what did she see, this fanciful child? She said she saw a ghostly figure near the well. I told her it was nonsense, probably just Michael Garfield tending the roses. But she was adamant, said it wasn't a person, not exactly. Elizabeth shook her head. I should have listened. Poirot's mind raced. The quarry garden again. Michael Garfield. And now a ghostly figure near a well. The pieces were beginning to align, but the picture remained maddeningly incomplete. He thanked Elizabeth and turned toward Rowena Drake's estate, the mist swirling around him like a conspirator. Rowena Drake's home was a grand affair, a Georgian manor draped in ivy, its windows reflecting the weak October sun. Pumpkins lined the driveway, their carved faces grinning grotesquely, a reminder of the party that had turned deadly. Rowena greeted Poirot in the drawing-room, her auburn hair gleaming under the chandelier, her smile polished but brittle. Monsieur Poirot, she said, gesturing to a plush armchair, I trust you're finding Woodler Common enlightening. Most enlightening, Madame Poirot replied, settling into the chair with a practiced grace. But also most troubling, the death of Joyce Reynolds. It is no isolated tragedy. I think it is tied to the past, to secrets this village holds close. Rowena's smile faltered, her fingers tightening around a teacup. Secrets. Surely you don't believe the nonsense Joyce was spouting about witnessing a murder. Poirot's gaze was unwavering. Nonsense, madame, or truth disguised as a child's tale. Tell me, what do you know of Olga Semenoff and the matter of Mrs. Llewellyn-Smythe's will? Rowena's cup clattered against its saucer. Olga, that was ages ago. She was an au pair, nothing more. As for the will, there was some confusion. Yes, but it was all sorted out. I inherited fairly, if that's what you're implying. Implying. Poirot's voice was soft, almost playful, but his eyes were sharp as flint. "I do not imply, madame, I observe. And I observe that you are uneasy. Perhaps there is something you wish to share. Something about Olga, or the quarry, garden, or a certain gardener who tends it." Rowena stood abruptly, her cheeks flushed. "You're fishing, Monsieur Poirot. I've nothing to hide. Michael Garfield is a talented gardener, nothing more. As for Olga, she left. That's all there is to it." Poirot rose, his movements deliberate. "For your sake, madame, I hope that is true. But secrets, they have a way of rising, like the mist that cloaks this village. And when they do, they bring the truth with them." As he left the manor, Poirot's mind buzzed with new questions. Rowena's defensiveness was a crack in the village's facade, and Michael Garfield's name kept surfacing like a persistent ghost. But it was the mention of the well in the quarry garden that gnawed at him most. Joyce had seen something there, something that might have cost her life. And now, Poirot suspected, the quarry held the key to unlocking the village's buried secrets. The quarry garden was a short walk from the manor, a sunken expanse of wild roses and crumbling stone walls, its air heavy with the scent of earth, bough, and decay. Michael Garfield was there, pruning a thorny bush with a pair of shears that glinted in the fading light. He was a strikingly handsome man, his dark hair tousled, his eyes holding a quiet intensity that made Poirot's instincts prickle. "Monsieur Garfield," Poirot called, approaching with a measured step. "A fine garden you keep, though it seems to harbor more than roses." Michael paused, his shears stilling. "Monsieur Poirot, I heard you were asking questions. What brings you here?" "The truth," Poirot said simply. "Joyce Reynolds spoke of a ghostly figure in this garden near the well. I wonder, did she see you, perhaps, or something else?" Michael's smile was slow, almost mocking. "A ghostly figure sounds like a child's fancy. I'm here most days, tending the grounds. If Joyce saw anything, it was probably me." Poirot stepped closer, his voice low. "And yet, monsieur, I think you know more than you say. Olga Semenoff was last seen in this garden, was she not? And now Joyce is dead, after claiming to have seen a murder. The coincidences, they pile up like leaves." Michael's eyes darkened, but his voice remained steady. "You're a clever man, Poirot, but you're chasing shadows. Olga left years ago. Joyce was just a girl with a big imagination. If you want answers, look elsewhere." Poirot held his gaze, undeterred. "I shall, monsieur. But I warn youth, shadows of this garden are long, and they do not hide forever." As he walked away, Poirot's mind turned to the well. It was an ancient thing, half hidden by vines, its stones slick with moss. He crouched beside it, peering into its depths, but the darkness revealed nothing. Yet something about its weight, of its silence, the chill that seemed to emanate from its depths stole Poirot. He was close to the truth. That evening, Poirot sat in his rented room at the village inn, a single candle casting flickering shadows. On the walls, he spread his notes across the table: Olga Semenoff, the forged will, Mrs. Llewellyn Smyther's death, the quarry garden, Michael Garfield, Rowena Drake, and now the well. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the connections remained elusive. He sipped his tisane, the herbal scent calming his racing thoughts. "The village," he murmured. "It is like a tapestry, woven with threads of deceit. But where is the thread that unravels it all?" A knock at the door interrupted his reverie. Ariadne Oliver stood there, her face pale, her eyes wide with urgency. "Poirot, you must come quickly. It's Judith Butler. She's at the Quarry Garden, and she's found something." Poirot grabbed his coat, his heart quickening. "What has she found, Madame Oliver?" Ariadne's voice trembled. "A ribbon, Miranda's ribbon. It was caught in the vines by the well." Poirot's breath caught. Miranda, the quiet girl who had seemed so withdrawn, so burdened by secrets. If her ribbon was in the quarry, then she, too, was entangled in this web, and Poirot feared she might be in grave danger. The Quarry Garden was a different beast by night, its shadows pooling like ink, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and something sharper, almost metallic. Judith Butler stood by the well, put her face illuminated by a lantern, her hands clutching a scrap of blue ribbon. Miranda stood beside her, her eyes wide with fear. "Monsieur Poirot," Judith said, her voice tight, "I found this while walking with Miranda. She says she lost it weeks ago, but it was here, tangled in the vines." Poirot took the ribbon, his fingers tracing its delicate weave. "Mademoiselle Miranda," he said gently, "when did you lose this? And what were you doing in this garden?" Miranda's voice was barely a whisper. I come here sometimes to think. It's quiet, but a few weeks ago I saw something. Not a person, exactly, but something moving near the well. I dropped my ribbon and ran." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And did you tell anyone what you saw? Joyce, perhaps?" Miranda nodded, tears brimming. "She said she'd seen something too. She wanted to make it a story, to tell everyone at the party. I told her not to, but she wouldn't listen." Judith pulled Miranda close, her voice fierce. "Monsieur Poirot, what does this mean? Is my daughter in danger?" Poirot's gaze softened, but his resolve was iron. "Madame, I promise you, I shall find the truth. But for now, keep Miranda close. The shadows of this garden are not yet done with us." As Poirot escorted Judith and Miranda back to the village, the mist seemed to thicken, wrapping the Quarry Garden in a veil of secrecy. The ribbon, the well, the forged will, Olga's disappearance all pointed to a truth buried deep in Woodler Common's past. But the village was not ready to yield its secrets. Not yet. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. Joyce's claim, Olga's fate, Rowena's unease, Michael's evasiveness, and now Miranda's ribbon. The puzzle was taking shape, but the final piece remained just out of reach. He paused at the edge of the garden, glancing back at the well. Its darkness seemed to beckon, promising answers but warning of danger. "Patience, Hercule," he whispered to himself. "The truth, it waits, but it will not wait forever." The chapter closed with Poirot standing alone in the mist, the village's secrets swirling around him like ghosts, each one a step closer to the truth, and to the darkness that had claimed Joyce Reynolds. Chapter 8. The Child Who Knew Too Much. The moon hung low over Woodler Common, its pale light filtering through the gnarled branches of ancient oaks, casting twisted shadows across the village green. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a reminder of the Hallowe'en festivities that had so abruptly turned to tragedy. Hercule Poirot, his small frame bundled in a meticulously tailored overcoat, stood at the edge of Rowena Drake's sprawling estate, his keen eyes scanning the darkened windows of the manor house. The festive glow of carved pumpkins had dimmed since Joyce Reynolds' shocking death in the apple-bobbing tub, replaced by an oppressive stillness that seemed to whisper of secrets yet uncovered. Inside the manor, the remnants of the spooky soiree lingered, cobweb-draped candelabras, half-eaten trays of toffee apples, and a lingering chill that no fire could dispel. Poirot had spent the morning interviewing party guests, each conversation revealing fragments of Woodler Common's tightly woven tapestry of gossip processes and whispered innuendos. Yet it was the quiet, wide-eyed gaze of Miranda Butler, Judith's 12-year-old daughter, that had caught his attention most sharply during the day's inquiries. There was something in the girl's demeanor, her hesitant pauses, the way her fingers twisted the hem of her sweater, that suggested she carried a burden far heavier than her years. Poirot adjusted his hat, its brim casting a sharp shadow across his face, and made his way toward the Butler cottage, a modest stone house tucked behind a copse of yew trees. The village was a labyrinth of contradictions, quaint cottages with ivy-clad walls, juxtaposed against the undercurrent of suspicion that now pulsed through its lanes. Joyce's boast of witnessing a murder, dismissed as childish fancy, had taken on a sinister weight since her lifeless body was pulled from the water. Poirot's mind, ever methodical, churned through the possibilities. Had Joyce seen something real? And if so, who in this seemingly idyllic village would kill to keep it hidden? The Butler cottage was a humble contrast to Rowena Drake's grand estate. Its low ceilings and uneven floors spoke of generations past, and the faint smell of lavender and wood smoke greeted Poirot as Judith Butler opened the door. She was a striking woman, her dark hair pulled into a loose bun, her eyes sharp yet guarded, as if she were perpetually bracing for bad news. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice polite but laced with wariness. "To what do we owe this visit?" "I am here, Madame Butler, to speak with your daughter, Miranda," Poirot replied, his tone gentle yet firm, his Belgian accent softening the edges of his words. "There are matters concerning the tragedy at the party that I believe she may shed light upon." Judith's lips tightened, but she stepped aside, gesturing toward the sitting room. "She's in the garden. She's been quiet since the party, more than usual." The garden behind the cottage was a wild, untamed place, its borders overrun with foxgloves and nettles, a sharp departure from the manicured precision of Rowena's estate. Miranda sat on a weathered bench beneath a willow, her slight frame curled inward, a book open on her lap but unread. Her auburn hair caught the moonlight, giving her an almost ethereal quality, as if she belonged to the misty legends Mrs. Goodbody had spun about the village's darker past. Poirot approached slowly, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the damp grass. Aware that a child's trust was a delicate thing, easily shattered. "Mademoiselle Miranda," he began, bowing slightly, his mustache twitching as he offered a warm smile. "I am Hercule Poirot, a friend of Madame Oliver. May I sit with you a moment?" Miranda's green eyes flicked up, wary but curious, like a deer sensing a predator in the underbrush. She nodded, closing her book-worn copy of The Secret Garden, and shifted to make room. "You're here about Joyce," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, carrying the weight of unspoken fears. "Oui, ma petite," Poirot said, settling beside her, his hands folded neatly over his walking stick. "I am told you were close to Joyce Reynolds. Her words at the party about a murder she claimed to have seen, they trouble me. I wish to understand what she knew, and I believe you may hold a piece of this puzzle." Miranda's fingers tightened around the book, her knuckles paling. "Joyce liked to tell stories," she said, her gaze dropping to the ground. "She made things up sometimes to sound important. Everyone said so." Poirot tilted his head, studying her. The girl's words were rehearsed, as if she'd been coached to deflect. Yet her eyes betrayed a flicker of something deeper, fear, perhaps, or guilt. "And yet," he said softly, "her story, it seems, has cost her dearly. I do not believe you are one to dismiss a friend so lightly, Miranda. If there is truth in what she said, or even a half-truth, it is my duty to uncover it. Will you help me?" The silence stretched, broken only by the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Miranda's shoulders hunched, and for a moment Poirot thought she might bolt. But then she spoke, her voice trembling like the willow branches above. She wasn't lying, not exactly, but it wasn't her story. It was mine. Poirot's heart quickened, though his expression remained serene, a mask of calm perfected over years of unraveling human secrets. "Yours, mademoiselle. Tell me, then, what it is you saw." Miranda drew a shaky breath, her eyes darting toward the cottage, as if expecting her mother to appear. "It was last summer," she began, her voice low, as if the words themselves were dangerous. "I was in the quarry garden near the old well. I go there sometimes. It's quiet, and I like the flowers. Michael Garfield, the gardener, he was there, too. He didn't see me at first. I was behind the yew hedge, picking blackberries. He was with someone, a woman. They were arguing, their voices sharp, like they didn't want anyone to hear. I couldn't make out everything, but it was about money, and something about a will. Then the woman, she had an accent. Not from here, she screamed, and Michael, he pushed her. She fell into the well. There was a sound, like a crack, and then nothing." Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. The quarry garden, the well, the missing au pair, Olga Semenoff, whose name had surfaced in his talks with Superintendent Spence. "This woman," he said carefully. "Did you know her?" Miranda shook her head, her auburn hair catching the moonlight. "I'd seen her before, at Mrs. Llewellyn-Smyther's house. She was the au pair, I think, Olga. But I didn't tell anyone. I was scared. Michael's always so kind to me, bringing me flowers, telling me stories about the garden. I thought maybe I'd imagined it, or gotten it wrong. But Joyce overheard me talking to myself one day, practicing what I'd say if I ever told anyone. She took the story, said it was hers, to make herself sound brave at the party. Poirot leaned forward, his voice a soothing murmur. "And you fear now that this secret has brought danger to Joyce and perhaps to you?" Miranda's eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them back fiercely. I didn't think anyone would believe her. But then she died, and now I keep seeing Michael in the village, watching me. He smiles, but it's different now. Like he knows I know. The weight of her confession settled over Poirot like a fog. This child, barely 12, had carried the burden of a murder witnessed in the shadows of a forgotten garden. The quarry garden, with its wild beauty and hidden altar, was no mere backdrop. It was the heart of this mystery, a place where secrets had been buried deeper than the roots of its ancient trees. Michael Garfield, the charming gardener with eyes that lingered too long, emerged in Poirot's mind as a figure of quiet menace, his easy smiles a mask for something darker. "Ma petite," Poirot said, his voice steady as he placed a reassuring hand near hers, careful not to touch. "You have been brave to tell me this. Your silence protected you, but it cannot continue. I will ensure your safety, but you must trust me. Tell me, did Joyce speak to anyone else of this?" Miranda shook her head. "I don't think so. She only told me she'd use it to get attention at the party. But Leopold, her brother, he was always following her. He might have heard something." Poirot's mind seized on this new thread. Leopold, the sullen boy who'd lingered at the edges of the Hallowe'en party, his eyes darting nervously. If he, too, knew of Joyce's story, or worse, the truth behind it, he could be another link in this deadly chain. The detective's thoughts were interrupted by a rustle in the garden, a shadow shifting among the yews. Miranda gasped, her body tensing, but Poirot raised a hand, his sharp eyes scanning the darkness. "It is nothing, perhaps the wind," he said, though his tone held a note of caution. "But we must be prudent. Return to your mother now, and speak of this to no one. I, Hercule Poirot, will see that justice is done." Miranda nodded, clutching her book as she hurried back to the cottage, her footsteps quick and light like by a fawn fleeing a hunter. Poirot remained on the bench, his mind a whirl of connections. Olga Semenoff, the au pair, pushed into a well, a forged will, whispered about in village gossip. Michael Garfield, whose charm masked a predator's calculation. And now Miranda, a child who knew too much, her secret a beacon for danger in this village of shadows. The night deepened, the moon casting its cold light over the garden. Poirot rose, his cane tapping softly against the earth as he made his way back to the village. The quarry garden called to him, its secrets buried in its soil, its well a silent witness to a crime that that had sparked a chain of death. Joyce's murder was no isolated act, it was a desperate attempt to bury the truth. And now, with Miranda's revelation, Poirot held the key to unmasking the evil that lurked beneath Woodler Common's festive facade as he passed the village green. A flicker of movement caught his agile figure slipping into the shadows near the churchyard, too swift to identify. The air grew colder, the pumpkins carved grins leering in the darkness, as if mocking the detective's pursuit of truth. But Hercule Poirot was undeterred. His little grey cells hummed with purpose, piecing together the puzzle of a child's death, a hidden murder, and a village that guarded its secrets with a ferocity that had already claimed one life and, he feared, might yet claim another. Chapter 9. The Ghost of Olga Semyonov. Air in Woodler Common hung heavy with the scent of damp leaves and wood smoke, a cloying perfume that clung to the village like a spectral shroud. Hercule Poirot adjusted his scarf against the evening chill, his polished shoes crunching on the gravel path leading to the village hall. The Hallowe'en party's grim aftermath lingered in the collective memory, and Joyce Reynolds' lifeless face, glimpsed in the apple-bobbing tub, haunted Poirot's meticulous mind. Her claim of witnessing a murderer boast dismissed as childish fancy had taken on a sinister weight. Now, as twilight draped the village in violet shadows, Poirot's instincts whispered that the key to Joyce's death lay buried in the past, in the ghostly figure of Olga Semyonov. Inside the hall, the remnants of the party had been swept away, but the space felt no less oppressive. The wooden beams overhead seemed to sag under the weight of secrets, and the flickering gas lamps cast jagged silhouettes on the walls. Poirot had requested a meeting with Mrs. Llewellyn Smyther's former solicitor, Mr. Fullerton, a man whose pinched features and nervous demeanor suggested he carried more than legal documents in his satchel. Ariadne Oliver, ever the faithful ally, sat beside Poirot, her notebook open, her pen tapping an impatient rhythm, her apple-scented perfume, a nod to her latest novel, mingled oddly with the hall's musty air. Monsieur Fullerton, Poirot began, his voice smooth yet piercing. You were the solicitor for the late Mrs. Llewellyn Smythe, were you not? And you knew the au pair, Olga Semyonov, who vanished some 2 years ago. Fullerton's fingers twitched around his spectacles, which he adjusted unnecessarily. Yes, I knew her. A quiet girl, diligent, but troubled, perhaps. She left suddenly, you know. No one could say why. Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle signal of his skepticism. Troubled, you say, and yet no one in Woodler Common seems to recall precisely when or how she departed. It is curious. Nan, a young woman, vanishes, and the village shrugs as if she were a leaf carried off by the wind. Ariadne leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Joyce said she saw a murder, Mr. Fullerton, and now she's dead. Doesn't it strike you as odd that a girl who claimed to witness something so grave ends up drowned at a party? Fullerton's face paled, his lips parting as if to protest, but no words came. Poirot seized the moment, his gaze locking onto the solicitor's. Let us speak plainly, monsieur. There are rumors, whispers, if you willth, that Olga Semenov was entangled in a matter most serious, a will, perhaps, one that did not please certain parties. The solicitor's hands trembled, and he clutched the edge of the table. I don't know what you mean. Mrs. Llewellyn Smyther's will was straightforward. The estate went to her niece, Rowena Drake, as expected. Olga had nothing to do with it. And yet, Poirot pressed, his voice dropping to a velvet murmur, there are those who say a codicil existed, a document that altered the will's terms, a document that, perhaps, favored Olga herself. Such a thing would make enemies, would it not? Fullerton's eyes darted to the door, as if expecting it to burst open. You're fishing, Mr. Poirot. There's no proof of any codicil. It's all gossip, village nonsense. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. Gossip, monsieur, is often the shadow cast by truth. And I, Hercule Poirot, am most adept at reading shadows. Ariadne scribbled furiously, her pen scratching like a beetle across the page. If Olga was involved with a forged will, she said half to herself, and Joyce somehow knew about it, that would explain why someone wanted her silenced. But how would a child stumble across such a secret? Poirot's eyes gleamed. That, Madame Oliver, is the question we must answer. Joyce was a girl who liked to tell stories, but stories, like pumpkins, often hide something beneath their surface. We must peel back the layers. The next morning, Poirot stood at the edge of the quarry garden, a place that seemed to pulse with an eerie vitality. The garden, tended by the enigmatic Michael Garfield, was a labyrinth of twisted vines, bough and gnarled trees, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. The air was thick with a scent of wet earth and decaying roses, and a faint mist curled around the stone benches, as if the garden itself were exhaling secrets. Poirot's attention was drawn to a small, overgrown path leading to a crumbling well, its stones slick with moss. The villagers called it the pussy in the well, a nod to a grim nursery rhyme Mrs. Goodbody had recited with unsettling relish. Poirot crouched beside the well, his gloved fingers tracing the uneven rim. Something about the place felt wrong, as if the earth itself recoiled from what it concealed. "Bonjour, Monsieur Poirot," came a voice, smooth and honeyed, yet laced with a chill. Michael Garfield emerged from the mist, his gardener's apron stained with soil, his eyes glinting like polished obsidian. "You seem quite taken with my little garden. Are you looking for inspiration, perhaps, or something more tangible?" Poirot rose, brushing imaginary dust from his coat. "Inspiration, Monsieur Garfield, is for poets and dreamers. I seek facts. Tell me, what do you know of Olga Semenov? She was last seen near this very garden, was she not?" Michael's smile was a crescent moon, sharp and fleeting. "Olga, a sweet girl, but flighty. She used to wander here, sketching the flowers, talking to herself. I suppose she grew tired of village life and left. It happens." Poirot's gaze never wavered, and yet her departure left no trace, no letter, no farewell. It is as if she became a ghost. "Nan, Tell me, did you ever see her with Joyce Reynolds? Perhaps, or hear Joyce speak of her?" Michael's smile faltered just for a moment. Joyce, that little braggart. She was always spinning tales, following people around, poking her nose where it didn't belong. If she said anything about Olga, it was probably nonsense. "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "But nonsense, like a seed, can sometimes take root in truth. And I am most curious about what grows in this garden." As Michael turned away, his movements too casual, Poirot's eyes lingered on the well. A faint glint caught his attention, a sliver of metal half buried in the moss. He knelt again, carefully extracting a small, tarnished locket. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman with sharp cheekbones and haunted as Olga Semenoff. He was certain. Discovery sent a shiver through him, not from the cold, but from the realization that Joyce's boast might have been more than a child's fancy. That evening, Poirot visited Judith Butler's cottage, a quaint dwelling nestled at the edge of the village. Judith, with her auburn hair and guarded demeanor, welcomed him with a wary politeness. Her daughter, Miranda, hovered in the doorway, her pale face framed by dark curls, her eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and fear. "Monsieur Poirot," Judith said, pouring tea with hands that trembled slightly. "I don't see how we can help." Miranda barely knew Joyce, and I was busy at the party. "We're not involved in whatever this is." Poirot sipped his tea, his expression serene but probing. "Madame Butler, it is not involvement I seek, but perspective. Your daughter, Miranda, is a quiet observer, Nan. She sees things others miss. Perhaps she saw something the night of the party or before." Miranda's fingers tightened around the doorframe. "I didn't see anything," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Joyce was loud, always talking. I didn't like her much. Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. "Mademoiselle Miranda, it is not always what we like that matters, but what we know. Joyce spoke of a murder, and now she, is dead. If you know something, anything, it is your duty to speak." Judith stepped forward, protective. "She's just a child, Mr. Poirot. Leave her be." But Miranda's gaze flickered, and for a moment Poirot saw a shadow pass across, perhaps a shadow of guilt, or perhaps fear. I used to go to the quarry garden," she admitted, her words tumbling out. "Joyce followed me once. She said she saw something there, something bad, but she wouldn't tell me what. She just laughed and said it would make her famous." Poirot's heart quickened. "And this something bad, mademoiselle, did it involve Olga or perhaps Monsieur Garfield?" Miranda's eyes widened, and she shook her head fiercely. "I don't know. I didn't see anything. I swear it." Judith pulled her daughter close, her voice sharp. "That's enough, Mr. Poirot. You're upsetting her." Poirot rose, bowing slightly. "My apologies, madame. But the truth, like a buried seed, will not stay hidden forever. I will find it." As he stepped into the night, the wind carried a low, mournful howl, as if the village itself were grieving or warning him. The locket in his pocket felt heavier, its secrets pressing against his mind like a ghostly presence. The next day, Poirot sat in the village inn, a cozy yet dimly lit establishment where locals gathered to whisper over pints of ale. He had requested the presence of retired Superintendent Spence, whose weathered face and keen eyes belied his years. Spence arrived with a file of old reports, his expression grim. "Olga Semenoff," Spence began, sliding the file across the table. 22 years old. Au pair for Mrs. Llewellyn's Mythe. Vanished 2 years ago, just after the old lady died. No body, no evidence of foul play, but plenty of rumors. Some said she ran off with a lover, others said she was disposed of. Poirot's fingers traced the file's edge. Disposed of, you say? And these rumors, did they point to anyone in particular? Spence leaned closer, his voice low. Rowena Drake, for one. She inherited the estate, but there was talk of a codicil that gave Olga a share. If it was forged, as some claimed, Rowena would have had reason to want Olga gone. And then there's Michael Garfield. He was close to Olga too. Close, some said. He's got a way of charming people, but there's something cold about him. Poirot nodded, his mind weaving the threads together. And Joyce, our poor victim, her claim of witnessing a murder. Could she have seen something related to Olga's disappearance? A child's eyes are sharp, monsieur, and often see what adults overlook. Spence rubbed his chin. It's possible. Joyce was a nosy little thing, always eavesdropping. If she saw something in that quarry garden, say, an argument between Olga and someone else, it might have stuck in her mind. And if the killer found out, Poirot's eyes narrowed. Then Joyce became a liability. But why now? Why kill her at a Hallowe'en party in such a public manner? Spence shrugged. Panic, maybe, or opportunity. That apple-bobbing tub was out of sight for most of the party. Someone could have lured her there, held her under. Poirot's hand shot up, silencing him. Nan, monsieur, not lured. Joyce was impulsive, headstrong. She would not follow a stranger into danger. The killer was someone she trusted, or someone who acted swiftly in a moment of chaos. Spence's brow furrowed. You're thinking someone at the party, Rowena, Michael, or maybe that teacher, Elizabeth Whittaker. She's got a sharp tongue, and a way of watching people. Poirot's moustache curved slightly. All are possible, monsieur. But I am most interested in the quarry garden and the well. Something tells me it holds the key to Olga's fate, and thus to Joyce's. That night, Poirot returned to the quarry garden, guided by a lantern's feeble glow. The mist had thickened, curling round his ankles like ghostly fingers. The well loomed ahead, its stones glistening with dew. Poirot knelt beside it, his lantern casting a trembling light into its depths. The darkness below seemed to swallow the beam, as if guarding its secrets with jealous ferocity. He reached into his pocket, retrieving the locket. The photograph of Olga stared back at him, her eyes accusing, pleading. "Mademoiselle," he murmured, "what did you see?" And what did Joyce see that cost her life? A rustling in the bushes made him turn, his hand tightening around the lantern. Michael Garfield stepped into the light, his face a mask of calm. "You're persistent, Mr. Poirot," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Most people would have left the garden to its ghosts." Poirot stood, his posture impeccable despite the tension. "Ghosts, Monsieur Garfield, or truths buried out of sight. This locket belonged to Olga Semenoff. It was found here near the well. Can you explain this?" Michael's eyes flickered to the locket, and for a moment something raffia perhaps crossed his face. "I don't know anything about it," he said quickly. "She must have dropped it. She was always sketching here, leaving things behind." Poirot's voice was soft, deadly. "And yet you were close to her, were you not? Close enough to know her habits, her fears. Close enough, perhaps, to know why she vanished." Michael's smile returned, but it was strained. "You're chasing shadows, Mr. Poirot. Olga's gone. Joyce is gone. Let them rest." As Michael retreated into the mist, Poirot's gaze returned to the well. The wind howled again, a mournful cry that seemed to carry Olga's name. He knew, with a certainty that chilled his bones, that Joyce's murder was no isolated act. It was a desperate attempt to bury the past that began with Olga Semenoff's disappearance. The following morning, Poirot sat in Ariadne's rented cottage, the table strewn with notes and half-eaten apples. Ariadne paced, her energy crackling like static. "It's Olga, isn't it?" she said, her voice urgent. "Joyce must have seen something about her death. Maybe she overheard Rowena and Michael plotting, or saw them in the garden. But why would they kill a child over it?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. Because Madame Oliver Joyce was not merely a child. She was a witness. Her boast at the party was not a lie, but a truth she did not fully understand. She saw something perhaps in the quarry garden, perhaps involving the well that marked her as a threat. Ariadne stopped pacing, her face pale. "The well, you think Olga's body is there, don't you?" Poirot nodded slowly. "It is possible. The well is deep, forgotten, a perfect place to hide a crime. If Olga was killed to conceal a forged will, or to protect someone's inheritance, her body would be a dangerous secret. Joyce, with her curious eyes and reckless tongue, may have stumbled upon it." Ariadne shuddered. "It's horrible. A child murdered to keep a secret. And Miranda is in danger too, isn't she? If she knows something." Poirot's expression darkened. "Oui, madame. Miranda is a delicate thread in this tapestry. We must protect her, and we must act swiftly. The killer is still among us, and they will not hesitate to strike again." As the day faded into dusk, Poirot stood once more at the quarry garden, his lantern casting a golden halo in the gathering fog. The village was quiet, save for the distant tolling of a church bell, each chime a reminder of time slipping away. He had requested a police search of the well, but it would take time to organize. For now, he relied on his little gray cells, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that grew darker with each revelation. Olga Semenoff The au pair whose dreams had brought her to Woodler Common had become a ghost in more ways than one. Her disappearance, tied to a forged will and a web of greed, had left a stain on the village. Joyce, with her childish bravado, had unwittingly tugged at that stain, exposing a truth someone was willing to kill to protect. Poirot's fingers brushed the locket, its weight a silent promise. "Mademoiselle Semenoff," he whispered, "I will find your killer, and Joyce's. The truth will not remain buried." The wind answered with a low, mournful howl, carrying the scent of roses and decay. The quarry garden seemed to watch him, its shadows shifting like spectres in the mist. Poirot turned back toward the village, his resolve unshaken. The ghost of Olga Semenoff was speaking, and he would listen until the final truth was unmasked. Chapter 10. A Dance of Motives. The air in Woodler Common hung heavy with the scent of autumn leaves and the lingering chill of suspicion. The village hall, its timbered walls adorned with garlands of ivy and flickering jack-o'-lanterns, stood as a deceptive beacon of warmth against the encroaching dusk. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in his tailored overcoat, stood at the threshold, his sharp eyes scanning the gathering with the precision of a hawk. The Hallowe'en Party's tragic aftermath had cast a pall over the village, yet tonight, under the guise of a memorial gathering, Poirot had orchestrated a subtle trapper dance of motives, where every glance, every word might betray the killer. Inside, the hall buzzed with a nervous energy. Villagers mingled, their voices a low hum punctuated by forced laughter, as if to drown out the memory of Joyce Reynolds' lifeless face in the apple-bobbing tub. Ariadne Oliver, her auburn hair slightly disheveled from her fervent note-taking, stood near a table laden with spiced cider and pumpkin tarts. She caught Poirot's eye and gave a subtle nod, her expression a mix of determination and unease. They had agreed. Tonight was not merely a social affair, but a stage for observation, where the guilty might falter under scrutiny. Poirot adjusted his moustache, a gesture as deliberate as his thoughts, and stepped into the fray. The room was a tableau of contrasts, children in costumes darting between adults, their laughter a stark reminder of innocence lost, while the elders exchanged guarded whispers. Rowena Drake, the hostess, whose Hallowe'en soiree had turned deadly, moved with practiced grace, her emerald dress catching the candlelight. Yet her smile, Poirot noted, was too tight, her eyes too quick to dart toward the door. "Madame Drake," Poirot greeted, his voice smooth as polished ebony. "Your hospitality, even in such trying times, is most admirable." Rowena's smile wavered, a crack in her porcelain facade. "Monsieur Poirot, we must carry on, mustn't we? For the children, for the village. Joyce would have wanted it, perhaps." Poirot said, his tone neutral, but his gaze piercing. "And yet one wonders if Joyce's spirit lingers, demanding justice rather than festivity." Rowena's hand tightened around her glass of cider, but she recovered swiftly, offering a laugh. That rang hollow. "You have a flair for the dramatic, monsieur. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must see to the guests." Poirot watched her glide away, noting how she paused to speak with Michael Garfield, the gardener whose charisma seemed to draw eyes like moths to a flame. Michael stood near the fireplace, his lean frame silhouetted against the crackling logs, his smile both inviting and elusive. Poirot's instincts prickled Michael's charm was a mask, but what did it conceal? Ariadne sidled up to Poirot, her notebook clutched like a shield. "She's nervous," she whispered, nodding toward Rowena. And Michael, "He's too calm. Don't you think? Like a cat watching a mouse." "Indeed," Madame Oliver Poirot murmured, "but the mouse may yet outwit the cat. Observe, if you please, the interactions. The truth often hides in the spaces between words." Ariadne's eyes sparkled with intrigue. "You're staging a play, aren't you? Making them dance to your tune?" Poirot's lips twitched. "A dance, yes, but one where the steps reveal the soul. Now, let us join the waltz." He moved through the crowd, his small stature belying the weight of his presence. At a corner table, Judith Butler sat with her daughter, Miranda, whose pale face and wide eyes betrayed a quiet fear. Judith's protective arm around Miranda was a silent warning, but Poirot approached with a disarming smile. "Mademoiselle Miranda," he said gently, "you look as though the shadows themselves whisper to you tonight." Miranda's gaze flicked up, startled, then dropped to her lap. "It's just the party. It feels wrong after Joyce." Judith's voice was sharp. "She's upset, Monsieur Poirot. We all are. Perhaps this gathering was a mistake." "Or perhaps," Poirot said, his tone soft but probing, "it is precisely what we need to see who hides behind the mask of grief." Judith's eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, a commotion erupted near the center of the hall. Elizabeth Whittaker, the stern schoolteacher, stood toe-to-toe with Dr. Ferguson, the village physician, her voice rising over the murmur of the crowd. "You knew her, didn't you?" Elizabeth's words were clipped, her finger jabbing toward Dr. Ferguson. "Olga Semenoff. Don't pretend you didn't see her that summer, skulking about with that solicitor's clerk." Dr. Ferguson's face reddened, his moustache twitching. "Mind your tongue, Elizabeth. I treated her for a cold, nothing more. You're stirring ghosts for no reason." "Ghosts?" Elizabeth's laugh was brittle. "Joyce is dead, and now you're all acting as if nothing's amiss. Someone here knows something." The room fell silent, all eyes on the confrontation. Poirot's mind raced, cataloguing the exchange. Olga Semenoff, the missing au pair, was a spectre haunting Woodler. Common, her name surfacing again and again. Elizabeth's accusation, though reckless, was a spark in the dark, illuminating hidden tensions. Ariadne leaned close to Poirot. "She's bold, but she's scared. Look at her hands, they're trembling." Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Michael Garfield, who watched the scene with an unreadable expression. "Fear, Madame Oliver, is a powerful motivator, but so is guilt." As Elizabeth stormed off, Poirot approached Dr. Ferguson, who was mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "A most unfortunate outburst," Dr. Poirot said, "yet it raises questions. This Olga Semenoff Her name seems to unsettle many." Ferguson's eyes darted away. She was a troubled girl, that's all. Came and went, like so many au pairs. People love to gossip. Gossip, Poirot mused, or truth dressed in whispers. "Tell me, Doctor, did you ever suspect foul play?" In her disappearance, Ferguson stiffened. "I'm no detective, monsieur. I deal in fevers and broken bones, not mysteries." "Yet a physician sees much," Poirot pressed. "The pulse of a village, perhaps, or the secrets it keeps." Ferguson muttered an excuse and retreated, leaving Poirot to ponder. The doctor's unease was palpable, but was it guilt or merely discomfort at being questioned? Poirot's attention shifted to Rowena, who was now deep in conversation with Michael near a shadowed alcove. Their heads were close, their voices low, and Poirot's instincts screamed of collusion. He maneuvered closer, feigning interest in a display of carved pumpkins. Rowena's voice, though hushed, carried a note of urgency. "We can't let this unravel, Michael. Not now." Michael's reply was smooth, almost too smooth. "Relax, Rowena. No one's looking too closely. They're all too busy mourning." Poirot's heart quickened. The words were vague, yet their tone suggested a shared secret. He filed the moment away, knowing it could be the key to unlocking the mystery or a dangerous misstep. The evening wore on, the atmosphere growing thicker with unspoken accusations. Poirot noticed Miranda slipping away from her mother, her small figure darting toward the hall's rear exit. He followed discreetly, his steps silent on the polished floor. Outside, the night was crisp, the moon casting long shadows across the gravel path. Miranda stood near a gnarled oak, her breath visible in the cold air. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said softly, emerging from the darkness, "you seek solitude, but perhaps you also seek to unburden your heart." Miranda jumped, her eyes wide. I just needed air. It's too much inside. All those people staring." Poirot tilted his head, studying her. "And yet you see more than you say, do you not? The quarry garden, perhaps, holds memories you fear to share." Her lips trembled, and for a moment Poirot thought she might confess, but she shook her head, tears glistening. "I don't know anything. Please, leave me alone." Before Poirot could press further, Judith appeared, her face taut with worry. "Miranda, come inside. It's not safe out here." Poirot stepped back, bowing slightly. "Of course, madame, but know this. The truth, like the moon, cannot remain hidden forever." As mother and daughter retreated, Poirot lingered, his mind a whirl of connections. Miranda's fear, Rowena's tension, Michael's calculated calm, Elizabeth's accusations, all were threads in a tapestry of deceit. But the pattern remained elusive, and Poirot knew the killer was watching, waiting for a misstep back inside. The gathering was winding down, the villagers' faces etched with fatigue and suspicion. Ariadne approached, her notebook bulging with scribbles. "Anything?" she asked, her voice low. "Everything," Poirot replied, his eyes glinting. "And nothing. The dance is not yet over. Madame Oliver. But the music grows darker, and soon the guilty will stumble. As the last guests departed, Poirot stood alone in the hall, the jack-o'-lanterns glow casting eerie shapes on the walls. He felt the weight of the case pressing upon him, the lives lost and those still in danger. The killer was close, their motives tangled in a web of greed, fear, and betrayal. Tonight had been a performance, and Poirot was certain the next act would bring the truth into the light, to plunge Woodler Common deeper into shadow. Chapter 11. The second victim. The village of Woodler Common lay under a pall of unease, its autumnal charm dimmed by the shadow of Joyce Reynolds' murder. The spooky soiree, once the talk of the village, had become a grim memory, its festive glow replaced by whispered suspicions and sidelong glances. Hercule Poirot, summoned by Ariadne Oliver to unravel the mystery of Joyce's drowning in the apple-bobbing tub, had spent days peeling back the layers of the village's secrets. His meticulous inquiries had uncovered a tangled web of past crimes, an au pair's disappearance, a forged will, a stabbed clerkage thread pointing to a killer desperate to keep the truth buried. Yet, as the days grew shorter and the pumpkins on doorsteps began to rot, the villagers' fragile calm was shattered by another tragedy. It was a crisp Tuesday morning, the sky a bruised grey that promised rain. Poirot stood in the library of Apple Trees, Rowena Drake's grand estate, his gloved hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the scene before him. The room, with its towering bookshelves and velvet drapes, was a sanctuary of knowledge, its air heavy with the scent of pole leather and wax polish. But now it was a crime scene, its sombre dignity marred by the lifeless body of Leopold Reynolds, Joyce's younger brother, sprawled across a Persian rug. Leopold, a gangly 11-year-old with a mop of sandy hair and a penchant for eavesdropping, lay face up, his eyes wide and unseeing. His head rested at an unnatural angle, a faint bruise blooming on his temple. A heavy brass candlestick, its base smeared with blood, lay discarded nearby, glinting dully in the weak light filtering through the window. The scene was staged to suggest an accidental boy climbing shelves. A candlestick falling, but Poirot's sharp eyes saw through the ruse. The candlestick's position, the precise angle of the bruise, the absence of scuff marks on the polished floor, all spoke of deliberate intent. Rowena Drake stood by the door, her face pale beneath her carefully applied rouge. "I found him this morning," she said, her voice trembling but controlled. "I came to check the library for tomorrow's book club, and there he was. Poor boy. It must have been an accident, Monsieur Poirot. He was always so curious, always poking about where he shouldn't." Poirot turned, his moustache twitching as he fixed her with a piercing gaze. "An accident, Madame Drake. Perhaps. But Hercule Poirot does not believe in coincidences, particularly when two children from the same family meet such tragic ends within days of each other." Ariadne Oliver, hovering near a bookshelf, clutched an apple as if it were a talisman. "It's dreadful, Poirot," she said, her voice thick with emotion. First Joyce, now Leopold. What kind of monster targets children? And why? What could Leopold have known? Poirot's eyes flicked to the candlestick, then back to Rowena. That, Madame Oliver, is the question we must answer. Leopold was at the spooky soiree, was he not? Did he, perhaps, see something that night, something that made him a threat to the killer? Rowena's hand fluttered to her throat. He was there, yes, running about with the other children. I saw him near the apple-bobbing tub just before Joyce was found. He was laughing, playing, but I didn't notice anything unusual. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Joyce's boast about witnessing a murder had set this chain of events in motion, and now Leopold, her shadow and confidant, was dead. The boy's curiosity, his habit of lingering in corners, made him a likely witness to something dangerous. Poirot's thoughts turned to the quarry garden, the eerie spot where Olga Semenoff, the missing au pair, was last seen. Had Leopold stumbled upon a clue there, or overheard a conversation meant to stay buried? He knelt beside the body, his movements precise despite the weight of the moment. The bruise on Leopold's temple was fresh, the blood barely congealed. The candlestick, heavy and ornate, bore no fingerprints, a detail that spoke of calculation. Poirot's gaze swept the room, noting the undisturbed books, the neatly arranged furniture. The killer had been careful, but not careful enough. A single strand of dark thread, caught on the edge of a chair, stood out against the rug's crimson weave. Poirot plucked it with a pair of tweezers, slipping it into a small envelope. A clue, perhaps, but one that required context. Madame Drake, he said, rising. Who else was in the house last night? Rowena hesitated, her eyes darting to the window. Just the staff. Mrs. Goodbody was cleaning the upstairs rooms, and the cook was in the kitchen. I retired early, exhausted from everything. The children's parents have been coming and going, of course, offering condolences. Judith Butler was here yesterday with her daughter Miranda. Poirot's interest sharpened at the mention of Miranda, the quiet girl who seemed to carry the weight of unspoken knowledge. And Monsieur Garfield, the gardener, was he here? Rowena's lips pursed. Michael? No, he was working in the quarry garden, as usual. He's been tending to the roses, though they're half dead this time of year. Poirot filed the information by his mind, conjuring the image of Michael Garfield, the enigmatic gardener whose charm masked a troubling ambiguity. The quarry garden, with its tangled paths and hidden corners, was a recurring thread in this mystery, a place where secrets seemed to take root like weeds. Ariadne, unable to contain herself, stepped forward. Poirot, this is no accident. Leopold, tell you how to, was murdered, just like Joyce. Someone in this village is tying up loose ends, and they're not stopping. We need to protect the other children, Miranda, especially. She's been so withdrawn since the party. Poirot held up a hand, his expression calm but resolute. Patience, Madame Oliver. The little grey cells, they are at work. We will find this killer, but we must proceed with care. Panic will only serve their purpose. The morning wore on, as the police arrived, their heavy boots echoing through the silent house. Superintendent Spence, retired but assisting Poirot out of loyalty, surveyed the scene with a grim frown. "Another child," he muttered, shaking his head. "This is getting uglier by the day, Poirot. The village is in a panic. Parents are locking their doors, keeping their children indoors. And yet," Poirot said, his voice low, "the killer walks among us, hiding behind a mask of normalcy. We must uncover what Leopold knew, and why it cost him his life." The investigation shifted to the village, where news of Leopold's death spread like wildfire. The local pub, the Black Cat, became a hub of whispered theories. Its patrons huddled over pints as they debated who could commit such atrocities. Poirot, accompanied by Ariadne, visited the Reynolds household. A modest cottage on the edge of the village. Mrs. Reynolds, Joyce and Leopold's mother, was a wreck, her eyes red from weeping as she clutched a photograph of her children. "He was such a good boy," she sobbed, her voice breaking. "Always following Joyce, always listening. He said he saw something at the party, something about the tub, but I told him to stop making things up. Oh God, I should have listened." Poirot leaned forward, his tone gentle but probing. "What did he say, madame? Any detail, however small, may be the key to justice." Mrs. Reynolds wiped her eyes. "He said he saw someone near the tub, someone who wasn't playing the game. He wouldn't tell me who, just that it was wrong. I thought he was copying Joyce's stories, trying to be important." Ariadne's hand tightened on her apple, her knuckles white. "Poirot, he must have seen the killer. That's why they went after him." Poirot nodded, his mind piecing together the puzzle. Leopold's presence near the apple-bobbing tub placed him at the heart of Joyce's murder. Had he witnessed the act itself, or something that implicated the killer? The thread from the library nagged at him a dark wool, unusual for the season. He needed to trace its origin, but first he turned his attention to the other villagers. At the schoolhouse, Elizabeth Whittaker, the stern schoolteacher, was overseeing a subdued class. The children, usually boisterous, sat in eerie silence, their costumes from the party replaced by somber jumpers and pinafores. Elizabeth's face was a mask of control, but her hands trembled as she sorted papers. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice clipped, "this is a terrible loss. Leopold was a bright boy, if a bit nosy. I trust you'll find whoever did this before more harm comes." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Nosy, you say? Did he ever speak of the party, or of his sisters' claims?" Elizabeth hesitated, her fingers pausing over a stack of essays. "He was always whispering with Joyce, sharing her silly stories. After the party, he asked me odd questions about the quarry garden, about whether people could disappear forever. I told him to focus on his lessons." Poirot made a mental note. Leopold's questions about the quarry garden suggested a connection to Olga Semenov, whose disappearance loomed large over the case. He thanked Elizabeth and moved on his next stop, the quarry garden itself. The garden was a haunting place, its paths overgrown with brambles, its stone walls slick with moss. Michael Garfield was there, pruning a skeletal rosebush, his movements graceful yet oddly deliberate. His dark hair fell across his forehead, and his smile, when he saw Poirot, was both welcoming and guarded. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, setting down his shears. "A grim day, isn't it? Poor Leopold. The village won't be the same." Poirot tilted his head, studying the gardener. "Indeed, Monsieur Garfield. You were at Apple-trees the night of the party. Did you see Leopold near the apple-bobbing tub?" Michael's smile faltered, but only for a moment. "I was outside most of the evening, tending the lanterns. The children were everywhere, hard to keep track. Leopold was a curious one, always poking about. Maybe he saw something he shouldn't have." The words hung in the air, and Poirot felt a chill unrelated to the autumn wind. Michael's tone was casual, but his eyes held a flicker of something defiant, perhaps, or fear. Poirot thanked him and turned away, the dark thread in his pocket weighing heavily on his mind. Back at Apple-trees, Ariadne was pacing the hall, her apple now a core. "Poirot, we can't wait any longer. Miranda Butler, she's been so quiet, so frightened. What if she's next?" She was close to Joyce, and Leopold was always trailing them. If he saw something, maybe she did too. Poirot's expression was grave. "You are right, Madame Oliver. We must act swiftly. I will speak to Mademoiselle Miranda and her mother. But first, I must examine this thread. It is a small thing, but in the hands of Hercule Poirot, a small thing can unravel a great crime." That evening, Poirot visited Judith Butler's cottage, a cozy dwelling filled with the scent of lavender and the soft glow of candles. Judith, with her serene beauty and quiet strength, welcomed him, but her eyes were wary. Miranda, pale and delicate, sat by the fire, a book open on her lap but unread. "Mademoiselle Miranda," Poirot began, his voice soft, "you were a friend of Joyce and Leopold. Did they ever speak to you of something strange? Something they saw at the party or before?" Miranda's fingers tightened on the book, her knuckles white. They talked about the quarry garden," she whispered. "Joyce said she saw something there a long time ago. Leopold said he saw someone at the party, someone who scared him. He wouldn't tell me who." Judith's hand rested on Miranda's shoulder, her voice firm. "That's enough, Monsieur Poirot. She's been through too much. Please, leave her be." Poirot nodded, but his mind was racing. The quarry garden, the apple-bobbing tub, the dark thread, each piece was a fragment of a larger picture. Leopold's murder was no random act. It was a desperate move to silence a witness. The killer was close, their masks slipping, and Poirot knew he must move quickly to prevent another tragedy. As he left the cottage, the wind howled through the village, rattling the pumpkins that still lined the street. Their carved faces seemed to leer, as if mocking the detective's efforts. But Poirot was undeterred. The little grey cells were at work, and the truth, like a candle in the dark, would soon illuminate the shadows of Woodler Common.